Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank everybody for coming out on this stormy night. I know we love the rain here, especially after as dry and as dusty as it's been. If you would all bear with me, we're going to move things around briefly. We have a Board of Adjustment meeting that's scheduled for after. There's only one item on it, and it'll be really quick. We're going to get that taken care of first, and then our regularly scheduled meeting will start probably about 10 minutes. So we appreciate your patience with that. I want to recognize that Commissioner Coleman is absent tonight. Our Vice Mayor Pro Tem is Commissioner Hersom. He's going to run the BOA, and I'm going to pass the gavel on down to him so he can call the BOA to order, and then we'll call our regularly scheduled meeting to order.
Do I need to pound the gavel? All right, a call to order the meeting of the Board of Adjustment. Can I get an approval of the agenda?
So moved. Second.
Moving in second. All in favor, signify by aye by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Next item of business, or next item on the agenda, which I should have read, was the call to order, the approval of the agenda, old business, new business, which has one item, and then adjournment. Old business is approval of the Board of Adjustment meeting minutes for April 22nd, 2019. Is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve. Second.
Moved and second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. New business is a quasi-judicial public hearing for application SDP 19-01, an application by, pardon me if I mispronounce this, Goomer Engineering, agent for Christopher Torrance, owner for site and development plan approval to allow the construction of a 12,000 square foot building with associated site development, including park and utilities, located at 954 Northwest 244th Avenue, Lot 2 of the 41 Commerce Park. As this is a quasi-judicial proceeding, I'll read the procedure, and then we will move forward with the meeting. The city attorney shall read into the record the ordinance resolution by title and number only, and the subject matter to be decided if there is no residence. So, Madam Attorney.
And this is application SDP 19-01, an application by Goomer Engineering, agent for Christopher Torrance, owner for site and development plan approval to allow the construction of a 12,000 square foot building with associated site development, including parking and utilities, located at 954 Northwest 244th Drive, Lot 2 of the 41 Commerce Park.
All right, thank you. At this point, we will explain the rules, and all public testimony will be taken under oath. Everyone testifying will be subject to cross-examination. All documents and exhibits shall be entered into evidence. The giving of opinion testimony is limited to experts. Closing arguments will be limited to the evidence of record. Anyone wishing to present or be part of the meeting, please step forward to be collectively sworn by the city clerk. Thank you, ma'am. So at this point, we will disclose any ex parte communication, and if there's anybody that has physically inspected the property.
I have not.
I have not. All right, excellent. So at this point, we will move on to the staff overview. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As stated, this is site and development plan approval for a roughly 12,000 square foot facility. That's that green light. Site and development plan for a roughly 12,000 square foot facility. It will be primarily warehouse with some office space in it. It is allowable by right in the industrial zoning district which the property is located in. And that's, in general, that is the overview. It has the accompanying parking structure, or parking facilities to go with it. And very simple, straightforward site plan. That was just the overview. But that's it.
Turn on your mic, you're professional. So the overview, at this point, we'd have the application, the applicant present their application, if they so desire.
I'll leave it to Mr. Torrance, who is engineer, but I spoke to him earlier, and they didn't really have a presentation. They wanted to present at
Okay.
this time.
So at this point then, with the staff report and recommendation?
Thank you, sir. Staff recommendation is to approve Resolution 2019-19, the application SDP 1901. It's in the 41 Commerce Park Industrial Park. The entire park is zoned industrial. Subject parcel is identified there on your screen. It's approximately just under 1.5 acres. It will have a 12,000 square foot office warehouse building. It's got a total of 20 parking spaces, one of which is handicapped, which meets all requirements, in fact exceeds the requirements for parking spaces. It also has a stormwater retention basin. Even though 41 Commerce Park is a master planned industrial park, there's a certain amount of runoff that still has to be maintained on site, and that the stormwater retention basin is designed to catch that additional runoff from the built facility. And that actually concludes the presentation. It is a very short, straightforward site and development plan. It was, I should note, it was approved on May 6th by the Planning and Zoning Board, recommended to approve to the Commission, the Board of Adjustment.
All right, thank you, Brian. We were not notified prior to that there would be any third-party interveners, but is there anybody who wants to act as a third-party intervener in this matter? All right, if not, we've got opportunity for public comments. Anybody from the public want to comment on the resolution before the board? All right, seeing none. The applicant can cross-examine staff if they desire. All right. No third-party interveners. Staff, anything else you want to add? This is your opportunity to cross-examine anyone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, but I have no further comments.
All right. Any questions by the board?
Mr. Chair, I just make a comment that this item on the P&Z agenda actually precipitated a conversation about if you're in an industrial complex like this where all of these questions have been answered and you have a relatively straightforward site plan, why can't staff just go ahead and approve it? And if the applicant doesn't like what staff has to say, then they come through this process. So I think in the future you'll be seeing some changes coming to you guys to decide on whether or not you want to allow staff to approve a site plan like this in an industrial park where the zoning has already been sort of preset. So I don't want anybody to get the idea that, you know, we're breezing through this, but it is a relatively straightforward in an industrial park. You know, there's not a whole lot to talk about on this one. So that's it, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Any final arguments by anyone? I'm just walking through the procedure, so it's dry. The city attorney will advise the board as to the applicable law and any factual findings.
The applicable law for quasi-judicial is competent substantial evidence.
Any deliberations by the board at this point? All right, at this point, is there a motion on the floor?
So move the approval of the resolution 1909. Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion carried. With that, that ends the Board of Adjustment meeting. So I believe we need a motion to adjourn. Nope. Then we are adjourned. Board of Adjustment is adjourned.
Good job, man.
That might be a record, actually. All right. Once again, welcome to this special City Commission meeting of May 28th, 7 p.m. I do appreciate your patience in allowing us to move that around a little bit. We'll begin with an approval of the agenda. Do I have that motion?
So moved.
I have a motion from Commissioner Farnsworth, a second from Commissioner Herseth. Are there any comments or changes to the motion as it was advertised? Does the public have any comments or changes to the agenda as it was advertised? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion passes unanimously. I'd like to invite Bill Conrad, Mayor Bill Conrad, to the podium to issue our invocation for this evening. If you would all please rise for the invocation and then remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you.
So my friends at the Country Kitchen have told me I don't have a prayer, but I'm here to show you tonight that I do have one. Join me in prayer, please. This is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice in it and be glad. Heavenly Father, we pause for a moment to remember those of us, those who have died in support of this country over the years. We just thank you for the great sacrifice they made, and we ask that you continue to be with their families down through the years, and just for us to take this time once a year to respect the sacrifice that they have made. And Heavenly Father, your Son also made a sacrifice for us for the forgiveness of our sins, and we pray to him tonight. We pray on behalf of this commission, this governing body, that they would have wisdom in carrying out their duties, that they would have patience in working with the public, and that they would have respect for one another as they work together. We ask all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Mayor Conrad. All right, our first presentation tonight is about Florida Municipal Electric Association Safety Award. Jamie, come on down and tell us how safe we are. We always love to hear that.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. It is my pleasure to once again announce that the City of Newberry has been selected by FMEA as and honored for our commitment to safety. We have been recognized that we had no reportable incidents or accidents for 2018 in the 0 to 59,999 man-hour category. And a short quote from FMEA: as practitioners of a dangerous profession, the Florida line workers and power crews place themselves at risk of receiving serious or fatal injuries while providing affordable and reliable power. For this reason, public power communities across the state emphasize the importance of safety training. FMEA recognizes and rewards safe operations through its annual safety awards. Utilities are placed in categories based on their total man-hours worked and rewarded for the most incident-free records. The incident rate used to judge utilities was based on the number of work-related reportable injuries or illnesses compared to the total number of worker hours during 2018, as defined by the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. City of Newberry, as I said before, has a perfect record of no incidents and work-related reportable injuries or illnesses 2018, and this is our second year in the road to be honored with this award.
That's excellent leadership, Jamie. It really is. Good job. Well done.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I'd also like to echo those sentiments. As Jamie indicated, the electric business is an extremely dangerous business. Safety, worker safety, and public safety is our highest priority. If you look at our list of priorities, it's number one. We made it through last year with 0 incidents, and we're always trying to raise the bar. So how do you get better than 0 instances? In the electric industry, we record near misses. So not only are we worried about when someone got hurt, what happened, but there was a potential that someone would get hurt. And so I think that we don't report that number, but it is an internal number. Our staff discuss it daily before they start work on any project, and there may be 5 projects during a day. They tailgate, they get together and decide how to perform the work safely. It's a extremely dangerous job. It's a tough job. Our guys are are the best. And I want to extend my congratulations and also share with the community things they may not know about what goes into providing safe power to our community. So thank you, Jamie. Please extend that to our crews.
Please do. All right. Our next presentation is the Newberry Main Street presentation. We have a video. Always like videos.
But first you gotta listen to us.
Ah.
Wait a minute.
Well, hang on one second.
Come on, Rod.
And we want to see it on the screen, not just listen to it.
Okay. You first.
Yes,
Yeah.
well, thank you, ma'am. Commissioners, city manager, mayor, thank you for having us. Louise Smith, Newberry Main Street Executive Director. Newberry Main Street, I better put these on, is pleased to report that we just had our 12th Farmers Market in downtown Newberry this afternoon. It is still in its, excuse me, infancy, and we have high expectations. It will continue to grow as word gets around that it happens every week. I'd like to introduce someone who is a familiar face at the city and Main Street's new president, Joy Glanzer.
Thank you, Louise. Thank you for having us tonight, and I'm happy to be involved in Main Street now. These people have spent years making it to where I can just step in and have this wonderful organization to work with. I didn't get the memo to wear the green shirts, but all these people are the volunteers. The reason they have them on is because they just came from the farmers market where they worked so hard to make it a success. And before we get to the video, I want to thank Randy Johnson. He's one of our volunteers who made the video. And the purpose of it is to just give you an overview of what we're doing, how wonderful it is, and how excited we are to have this farmers market. It took a long time coming, and we just thought we'd give you a little overview of what it is. It's about 8 minutes long, and I also want to say thank you for the city's support up until now to help us be who we are. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now, Amy, you can start the video.
And congratulations on becoming president.
Oh, thank you very much. You know, from one place to another.
Perfect.
Hi, this is Bill. It's a wonderful day to be here, and I'm here to sell with a purpose. Everything I sell here is focused on nutrition for our bodies. And for example, I have special mushroom that will give you all the meat or protein meat, and also I sell microgreen that give you all the vitamins and phytochemicals that your body needs. Besides selling things, and I'm here try to share my experience on nutrition and health. So next time when you come by, talk to me, and I can tell you something what I learned about how to eat right, what would be the best thing that can be the best nutrition for the body.
I'm Natalia Deryanko, the owner of Exotics, which I established in July of 2018. So it's a brand new farm. I focus on producing fresh products direct to customers, and focus on a lot of novelty crops. Some things that are a little more exotic than normally see on the markets. We produce fresh eggs, chicken and duck eggs,
that's all our honey is coming from our hives. Honey is our major product, and then we have honey-based products. Hence, the honey gems and the teas. You know, we just like to sweeten them with the honey, to keep it more healthy and natural to you. And then we have some vegetables on the side that we also grow, and really the honey is our way to assure people that we don't spray anything noxious to these plants, you know, because we don't want to kill the bees. We are bee friendly.
Hey there, I'm Keith Graham,
And I'm Dallas Graham.
and we're Graham Cattle. We're from Milwaukee, about 5 miles north of town, and we run an operation that's comprised of stocker and feeder cattle primarily, but in the last couple of years, we've really started to venture off and pull out some of the cattle that we really think are best, and we fatten those cattle up for the last year of their life. The last fully 1,000 pounds that we have those cattle, they're on full feed, and they're able to produce the marbling that we're able to do. We strive to put out a product that's white tablecloth, fresh and top quality as you can get, and we dry age those cattle for 3 weeks for tenderness and increased flavor. And out of those same animals that all grade top shelf, we have a full line of chuck roast, rump roast, short ribs, brisket, ground beef, sausage, which is a very popular item for us, beef sticks as well. And so we're trying to meet the customer's needs with just the best they can possibly buy locally. We're at Newberry here now, every Tuesday, and then
Alachua on Thursdays.
yeah. So we're really enjoying what we're doing. We're getting great feedback from everybody, and it's really rewarding to see the same faces come back week after week, extremely happy and pleased with the product they got and the value that they took part in, as well as they're spreading the word. And word of mouth is our best advertisement, and it's just the best feeling. Along with trying to do a good job and run a good business that's profitable, it's the most rewarding to know that you're doing right by the people and they really like what you're a part of. So we're very thankful this market still allows us to do that.
Again, we're John's Pantry. We're out of Brantford, Florida. Anything we can get in a jar, jellies, pickles, jams, anything we can, we got it. It's all cottage food, all locally sourced, locally grown, locally produced.
Jeremiah from Mount Center Farm down in Central Florida. We produce organically grown vegetables, fruits. Recently opened up a nursery with a lot of starter plants for your garden. We do heritage pork, we've got sausage, we've got cuts. We do pasture-raised chickens, ducks, and turkeys, and pasture-raised eggs as well. We grow a variety of vegetables, from greens to your vine plants to your tubers and fruit plants. We practice sustainable and organic agriculture, and we do a lot of local community work as well.
Hi, my name is Heather. I'm with Phoenix Creations. I just started out recently. I take all my products are made from either real flowers, sweets, herbs. I press the flowers and I make all kinds of different products. I have cards, bookmarks, make some different coasters. I'm making all kinds of different things. I'm experimenting. Another thing that I do is I 100% recycle junk mail, paper towel rolls, things like that, and I make my own tea. I embed it with different flower seeds, herb seeds, it depends on which ones, and I make different things. So like the cards, you can give it to somebody and then they can plant the card and actually have flowers from it. I'm playing around too with making my own potpourri. This week I had lavender sachets with rose petals and stuff, and they did really well today because they're smelling really good with all the sun. Doing some dried herbs. So I'm just playing around, trying to use all natural ingredients. And so far, it seems to be a big hit for everybody. Cut.
Well, I want to thank the Newberry Main Street volunteers for doing all of this. Every single Tuesday, you guys are out there, rain, heat, nothing scares you away. It's an awful lot of work to get something like this set up and going to get the word out. It's innovative ideas like creating a video and bringing it in here and showing it to everybody to entice them to come down. I know that Mayor Conrad and I can attest for the pickled eggs. They're delicious. We shared a jar. And I've been very much enjoying some Graham sausage I've been having all week long. So it's pretty tasty. If you haven't, I'm sure everything else there is wonderful as well. I'm making my way around all of the vendors, but thank you guys for doing that. It's a wonderful addition to the town, a wonderful addition to the community. And it's been something that residents have asked for a long time. So we do appreciate all of your efforts. Thank you very much. All right, and I think our next presentation is Alachua County Library Newberry Branch. Marlon, come tell us what's going on out at the library. You might need extra time. You got so much going on.
We do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. I appreciate your time tonight. I am Marlon Day with the Alachua County Library District, the Newberry Branch Library. Tonight, I'm here to talk about the summer reading program at the library. Many of you have heard parts of this presentation before. I think the mayor, this is his 7th time sitting through it, perhaps. But I feel very strongly about the importance of summer reading, and so I'm going to come here year after year talking about it. Okay, so here are some of the studies that back up what I just said. That show how important just summer reading is. We want to avoid what we call the summer slide, and personally I know that reading is very important. Last summer, my son, in a bit of rebelliousness against both his librarian parents, I don't think he cracked a book the whole summer, and he paid for it the whole year. He was behind the whole year. It wasn't until recently that he caught up and finally started making the A's that we expect, and he's done before. So I know personally that reading is very important during the summer. So how do we get the children to read? Well, we use a program called Beanstack. It's a program that the library purchases. It's available online. When children sign up for this program, they receive a free book and other prizes when they stop in the library. As they log their reading through the program, they earn digital badges as kind of an incentive. The more badges they earn, the more chances they have of winning one of the grand prizes, which is a party for them at the library with their friends at the end of the summer. Adults can also use this program to log their books. You can also write reviews of books, and you can read reviews that other people in Newberry have written. And we also have what we call discovery tracks, which are like themed activities, not necessarily related to reading, logging books, or logging minutes. But for instance, we might have one about springs, where one of the activities is go to a spring, and then you read a book about a spring, etc. These are a couple of the discovery tracks that we created that are Newberry-centric. This one is what the badge looks like before you complete it, and this is the Newberry Family Track. These are 3 of the activities. There's actually 10 of them on there. You complete 5 of the activities to earn the badge. And this is the Newberry Farming Track, which you can see when you earn the badge, it lights up in color on your homepage on Beanstack. So Beanstack can be accessed online. There's also a nice app that you can download on your phone. When you log a book with your app, just take a picture of the book's barcode, and it will fill out the information for you. It's real easy to do. So I'd encourage everybody to go to www.aclib.us/summer. All right, so how successful are we? These are numbers from last year. Can y'all make those out? Yes. And as you can see, last year we had 378 summer readers, which is down a little bit from the year before. We have about 6,000 people here in Newberry, so that's only about 6% or so that registered for the summer reading program. 1 in 16. Of course, my goal is to get everybody in Newberry to register for the summer reading program. Perhaps we could pass a law that makes it mandatory. I'm not sure. And I'd love to see these numbers increase. We logged almost 2,000 books last year. We had 737 badges earned between the people that participated, and these are just Newberry numbers. At High Springs last year, they had about 1,000 readers. They had quite a few more than us, And we're about the same size town, and we read just as much as they do. It's just a matter of getting people to use the app and document it. So that's the portion of our summer. That's the reading portion of our summer reading program. We also have some big programs coming to Newberry this summer, of course, as the part of the summer reading program. Encourage people to come in. Next week, we have the Santa Fe Teaching Zoo come in. They're going to be on Tuesday at 3:30 at the library. They're going to bring 4 different animals. I'm not sure what animals they bring, but it's going to be very entertaining. They come almost every year now. Yes.
My kids have been talking about that one for about a week or two.
It's
reminding me.
It'll be great. Next Thursday, the same week, we have 2 big programs. We also have Anna Moo. Anna Moo is a local Newberry resident. She's a famous children's performer. She's been performing for decades here in Newberry, and she's going to bring her delightful program to us at 3 o'clock on Thursday. You can also check out a lot of her music CDs. They're available in the library. We also have the Bats coming again this year. They came last year. It was a real big hit. If you haven't been to Louis Bat Conservatory, they have Fox Bats, I believe they're called, and they bring a live one out and talk about it, kind of bring their show on the road. And that's going to be Friday, June 14th at 11 a.m. Doodad, Professor Doodad is returning again. He's going to be here Thursday, June 27th at 4. He does a program every year around the summer theme. He's very entertaining, very educational. He's kind of like a poor man's Bill Nye. He's kind of funny. The following week, on July 12th, we have Amazing Animals. Jerry Walls is local. He's from Bell, I believe, and he brings in animals. He's coming actually twice this year. The first time he's going to bring spiders, scorpions, and snakes, which are always a big hit. He's going to be Friday, July 12th at 3 o'clock. And then the following week we have the Minestrelli Dog Show. These are circus dogs. Last year they were our first program during the summer, and the room was so packed. Our room is smaller than this, and we had well over 100 people in there. Don't tell the fire chief. The Wild Wonders Animal Show is a traveling exhibit. They bring animals from around the world. They're going to be on Wednesday, July 24th at 4 o'clock. The Florida Dingers are a storyteller group. They're going to bring The Florida Dingers Go to Outer Space July the 29th at 3:30. I haven't ever seen them, but I've heard wonderful things about them, and I'm looking forward to seeing them on the 29th of July. And then, excuse me, and then Jerry Walls is going to close out our big summer programs the end of the year. On August the 6th, he's bringing the alligators, and that's one of the alligators he brought last year. They're not little things, but he didn't. I saw someplace somewhere brought an alligator that was 6 foot long into I don't know if it was a library or a school or something. I don't think they'll let me do that. So we also have some awesome events that's coming this summer. We have the Sidewalk Chalk Art Contest we're bringing back next year. We're bringing back. We haven't had it in about 2 years. The last time we had it, we had some wonderful art produced on our sidewalks outside the library. We take pictures of it, post it on Facebook, and people can vote on it. If you know any talented artists or art teachers, maybe, please let them know about the contest. This summer, we also have some events for adults and teens. We have our Creative Bug classes. We're going to have those once a month. Creative Bug is a new program that we have at the library. It's an online resource that we use. And we're going to be making jewelry, banners, and some cool art on the 18th of June, the 10th of July, and August 8th. And this will be a great program for adults and teens. And finally, we have the Best You program. Best You is from the University of Florida Medical School. It's a 6-week in-home chronic disease self-management program that introduces basic life strategies and tools to individuals who are trying to make a change for the better. It's one session a week for 4 weeks, and the program allows you to get together with friends, neighbors, and family members to enjoy good and free food, as well as meaningful group discussions and activities that center around good lifestyle behaviors. See, they talk about nutrition and planning, stress management, financial accountability, and budgeting, among other things. A few programs I'd like to mention that didn't make the cut on the PowerPoint. We have our Dinosaur Craft program on June the 20th. Last year it was a huge event. I'm not trying to promote that too much because we had almost 200 people show up for it last year, and a bit overwhelming. The last Saturday in July, we have our Teen Battle of the Books competition downtown. Most of our team from last year graduated and moved on, so we're looking to replace them with some teen readers, some strong teen readers. We have a few of them lined up already, but if you know anybody that might be interested, you can sign them up at the library. We won the battle in 2017, and I'd like to see us return the title to Newberry. Last year, I believe Tower won the battle. Finally, our teen library specialist, she was here a couple of months ago doing a presentation about programs. She taught dance for about 20 years before we got her. And this summer on National Dance Day, which is July 26th, she's going to be teaching some simple dance routines. That program begins at 3, and the Dinosaur program on June 20th also begins at 3. All right. So that is all I have. I hope that everyone signs up for summer reading. I would encourage you to encourage others to sign up for summer reading. Like I mentioned, my ultimate goal is to have every Newberry resident participating, and I look forward to seeing all of you in the library this summer. I have some handouts on the table back here if you'd like to take them when you leave. More information can be found on our website, aclib.us/Newberry. Does anybody have any questions?
Marlon, you have so much going on, it's bewildering. Does anyone have any questions for Marlon?
The summer is a busy time for us. We always look forward to it every year.
We appreciate all you do. And I would absolutely echo, when I'm not pretending to be a mayor, sometimes I pretend to be a teacher. And read to your kids, read with your kids, encourage them to read. That's the number one way for them to stay on track. Just read comic books, back of cereal boxes, whatever they're reading, encourage them to do so. And thank you for what you're doing to encourage that as well. So, and I'm assuming that we can find all of that on the Newberry website,
absolutely,
library website,
yeah, if you
calendar of events and all that kind of stuff.
The entire full calendar, including programs that I didn't mention today, like our weekly story times, our Needle Crafters program, all of those are on our events calendar, which you can link through from aclib.us/Newberry.
All right. Thank you, sir. We
You're
appreciate you so much. Before I open up to public comments, I meant to say one thing to Main Street. A couple of weeks ago, you guys hosted a group of Girl Scout, what's it called? Thank you, Troop. Thank you. And they came back and they purchased all of their dinner items from vendors at the farmers market. They cooked the dinner and they have now eaten it. It was an overwhelming success. They really appreciated all the help that your vendors gave them in the research of it. And they've all scattered for the summer. But when they get back, I'm going to ask them to come and tell the commission a little bit about it. So thank you guys for helping them make that happen. Okay, we've come to the point in the evening for public comment. These are the 2-minute non-controversial comments letting us know you've lost your dog or you've got a garage sale coming, those kinds of things. Anybody have that kind of opportunity at the end of the night for a little bit longer comment? Okay, hearing none, I'll have a motion to approve the consent agenda. I have a motion from Commissioner Martin. Second from Commissioner Farnsworth. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion passes unanimously. That will bring us into our public hearings and ordinances. The first is a quarterly budget amendment. Madam Attorney, would you read that resolution by title only for us, please?
This is Resolution 2019-20, a resolution of the City Commission of the City of Newberry, Florida, adopting amendments to the fiscal year 2018-2019 and providing severability, conflicts, and an effective date.
All right, thank you. Dallas, you want to take us through the presentation, then I'll ask for a motion.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Commissioners. As you know, at the end of every quarter, the Finance Department brings you an update on where you stand in your budget. So at the end of the second quarter, which ended in March, we are 50% of the way through our budget. I'm happy to report that we are over budget on our revenues. We're at 67%, which is where we expect to be at this point during the year. All of our revenues are performing as anticipated. At the last quarterly budget review, I mentioned that building department permits were a little under where we expected them to be. However, at this time, they've corrected that, so they're trending right on target. Here's all your general fund revenues. As always, the majority of your revenue in your general fund comes from your local taxes. In your general fund expenditures, most of your departments are right on track. The few departments that are a little bit over that 50% mark all have reasonable explanations. Your law enforcement city attorney, that includes just contract payments we have outstanding right now. Your non-departmental's up a little bit. That has to do with the debt service payment we make out of that department to ourselves, to the electric fund for the debt the commission paid off a few years ago. And then the Parks and Rec department's up a little bit, and that's grant related as well as some increased expenses due to Westfest. I do think it's important to note here, in the budget workshop, the commission made the choice to raise your solid waste rates about $1 for residential. At the time, we were subsidizing solid waste expenses with taxpayer dollars. So at this point, 50% through the year, I am happy to report that the commission's increase did pay off, and charges for services in solid waste are meeting the expenses of the solid waste department. This is the same information from the previous slide, just in a different format. The blue shows how much has been spent year to date. The orange is how much the budget is. So as you can see, most of the departments are right on track at about halfway through the budget year. And then again, the same information, but this way it's broken up by primary source of expenditure. As always, the majority of the commission's funding in the general fund does go to public safety through your law enforcement and your fire department. In your smaller funds, your smaller governmental funds, they're all performing as anticipated. Your capital improvement fund, where your fire station is we're spending the money, the last little bit of money to finish that project. Champions Park is performing as anticipated. Your debt service fund and your VERF, Wild Spaces Fund, which is not the debt service fund, are all also performing as anticipated. In your electric fund, there's no reason that $94,000 is highlighted, so you can ignore that. But in your electric fund, we do have a little bit of a deficiency of revenues over expenditures. We're about $7,500 in the red at this point. However, it's been 100 degrees outside this week, so we anticipate sales will be up during the summer months, and we'll overcome that deficiency by the end of the year. In your water wastewater fund, again, we're performing as anticipated. Water and wastewater both have a little bit of surplus revenues over expenditures. Between both, it's about $16,000. On your debt service front, we've made 2 debt service payments so far this year to external debtors. Both of those were related to your utility systems, one in water, one in wastewater. And we have 2 more coming. That'll be in September and August. As the commission knows, we pay those with your development fees that are restricted to those debt service payments and for expansion of the system. Moving on to your budget amendment. It's a relatively simple budget amendment this time in your general fund. We are increasing the Westfest sponsorship revenue account to account for increased sponsorships we received, and then subsequently putting that money towards the Westfest expense account to pay the Westfest expenses we had. Again, Westfest was totally paid for by private sponsorships, as well as public sponsorships from other governments. And then kind of presumptuous on my end, but this budget amendment has to happen first. There is a gas tax funding amendment that is pulling reserves out of our gas tax reserves, $92,000, and placing it into our streets and roads budget to pay for the street resurfacing project that'll be before you later tonight. Obviously, if the commission doesn't approve that contract, those funds would sit there until the next budget amendment where we would remove them. Just so the commission knows, at the end of the last fiscal year, you had $117,000 in your gas tax reserve account. We're pulling out $92,000 to put into the budget this year, which leaves you about $25,000 in your gas tax reserve account for next year. That goes towards the same, towards the gas tax you collect in the year. Currently, we've been using the current gas tax we're collecting, plus what we've had in reserves to meet the need. It is something that we're going to talk about in our budget about the fact that we've used up those reserves, but we should be getting more loft money in the next couple of years as well. So that's the general fund. The only other budget amendment before you is there is a grant in the Champions Park Fund from the Gainesville Sports Commission, so we're changing the budget to accept that grant and to spend the funds on the purchase of some equipment at Champions Park. And that concludes my presentation.
Commission have any questions for Dallas? The two changes were the streets and roads money from the gas tax and the grant from the Sports Commission for Champions, and then the West Fest. So those were the three amendments that you'll be voting on. Commissioner Herson?
Just a question. With the surplus on the gas tax fund, was that just unspent money from previous years that we are now spending up to improve more roads than we had previously?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. The 9th cent of your local option fuel tax is restricted to expending only on capital projects that are identified in your capital improvement plan in your ordinances. There were a couple years there where we didn't have enough money to really do anything, so we banked it up, and we had gotten a bank, so we've been spending down that bank with our new increase in loft as well.
And the newly negotiated distribution between the 8 municipalities, we'll start to see that this upcoming year. It hasn't taken effect. We did a 2-year step for 20%. Another 2 years, we get another 20. So we'll get the whole thing by the end of this current life cycle. So we should start seeing an increase next year.
We'll see 3/4 of a year of increase.
Yeah. Commissioner Norfleet.
On the grant that you was talking about, will the city have to contribute any to that grant?
No, Mr. Mayor, the grant from the Gainesville Sports Commission covers the full cost of the equipment.
Commissioner Martin.
What were the additional expenses on West Fest that the $8,500 of additional revenue that we got went towards?
Is a lot of things. I'd have to pull the report and get back to you.
A lot of little things.
Yeah, and it just kind of all added up. There weren't single large expenses that I can think of off the top of my head.
Mr. Manager, you want to try to help him out, or it's not off the top of your head either?
Definitely not off the top of my head. I think that when we were projecting going into the budget, we, like everything, we project our revenues not to exceed our expenses. So when we began soliciting revenues, they exceeded what we anticipated, but expenses, followed like sign. And so there weren't any, outside of entertainment, a stage. The big expenses are entertainment, stage, and sound. Beyond that, then there's lots of little expenses, incidental type things that add up. But there's a full accounting, as Dallas said, but no one thing was $8,500 over.
Right, and Mr. Mayor, just for the commission's knowledge, we budgeted $20,000 in revenue and $20,000 in expense this year. And when we hit that $20,000 mark, we stopped spending. And then when we hit $21,000 in revenue, we would go spend another $1,000 if we needed to, but we never spent more than we had collected in our sponsorships.
Any more questions for Dallas? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve Resolution 2019-20.
So moved.
I have a motion from Commissioner Farnsworth, a second from Commissioner Herson. Any further questions from the dais or comments on the motion on the floor? Does the public have any questions or comments on the motion on the floor? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion passes unanimously. We'll move on to the legislative public hearing. First reading of ordinance 2019-11, which is an application by the City of Newberry amending the Newberry, Florida Code of Ordinances, land development regulations, flood damage prevention regulations. As Wendy's making her way down here, Madam Attorney, will you go ahead and read the ordinance into the record by title only, please?
I'd be happy to, Mr. Mayor. This is ordinance 2019-11, LDR 19-03, an application by the City of Newberry amending the Newberry, Florida Code of Ordinances, Appendix B, Land Development Regulations, Article 8, Flood Damage Prevention Regulations, to make modifications to bring the regulations into agreement with the most current FEMA-approved Code Companion Floodplain Management Ordinance for Florida communities.
Thank you, Madam Attorney. Go ahead, Wendy, make your presentation, and then we'll entertain a motion.
Thank you, Mayor. Commissioners, this application before you tonight is a result of changes that were made to I wanted to tell you one thing first. Just that the City of Newberry was one of the first communities that actually adopted the flood insurance program, the actual state's model flood ordinance. So that was in 2012, so that's pretty darn good. And the flood zone designations that we have are periodically, they're updated, and let's see. And so as a result of that, we want to bring before you some changes to the code that would bring it into conformance with FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency's code that they have for Florida communities. Staff is recommending that you approve on first reading the ordinance 2019-11 for the application 19-03. Essentially, the Federal Emergency Management Act requires that the emergency, wait a minute, okay, let me start over again. I'm having a little difficulty here. I'm trying to work with glasses and not glasses, and it doesn't help me think.
That is hard.
So essentially, all of the flood insurance study was updated back in, most recently, I think, at the end of last year and in November. And at that time, because they adopted the new insurance maps and changed some of that, and that's done every so often whenever there's new information or there's a lot of development happening or something going on, where they get new data. So they'll update those regulations and update your maps. So to continue participation in that, the city has to update our ordinance to adopt those new maps and the flood insurance maps. And you have to do that each time that happens to continue participation in the flood insurance study.
All right, let me pause you right there since
Yes.
we're back on track now. Are we clear about what's in front of you guys tonight so that we can stay good with FEMA?
So we're
adopt
just,
the same.
yes, amending the
Okay.
code to bring it into conformance with
Carry
FEMA's.
on.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're doing great.
So essentially, the changes that are being proposed are just clarifying language that's in the code now. The data that's required for applications when you want to develop in flood hazard areas, and then also the addition of allowing reinforced piers as a permitted type of foundation for manufactured homes, just an additional type. And then an additional note that we've recommended on your final plats that just say that when the flood zone information that you're providing on that plat and giving the date, so that we recognize that that data can change, so that if it does, that information is shown as when you actually got the plat approved. So the recommendation of staff is for approval. So that's it.
Okay. Any questions for Wendy before she walks away?
I guess not. Make a motion to approve 2019-11.
Okay, I have a motion from Commissioner Martin, second from Commissioner Norfleet. Any questions from the dais on the motion on the floor?
I got one question.
Commissioner Farnsworth?
What is the benefit of this ordinance?
FEMA money, right?
FEMA money?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. The FEMA requirements for if we're going to seek reimbursement is that we comply with their regulations. So if we had an event that we would like to apply to FEMA for funding, if we did not have these in place, that we would be denied eligibility.
Well, this makes it easy.
Any further questions from the dais? Does the public have any questions on the motion on the floor? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion passes unanimously. And we will move on to legislative and public hearing and first reading of ordinance 2019-13, which is an application by the City of Newberry, amending the Newberry, Florida Code of Ordinances about accessory uses and structures. And Brian is going to do this one. Before you get started, Brian, Madam Attorney, would you please read the ordinance by title only?
Mr. Mayor, this is ordinance 2019-13, an ordinance of the City of Newberry, Florida, amending the text of the City of Newberry Land Development Regulations as amended to amend section 4.2.4 entitled Accessory Uses and Structures and sections 4.4.3, 4.5.3, 4.6.3, 4.7.3, 4.8.3, 4.9.3, 4.9A.3, 4.10.3, 4.11.3, 4.12.3, 4.13.3, 4.14.3, 4.15.3, 4.16.3, 4.17.3, 4.18.3, 4.19.4, 4.20.3, 4.21.3, all entitled Permitted Accessory Uses and Structures, repealing all ordinances in conflict and providing an effective date.
Well done. You didn't miss one. I'm proud of you. Good job. And I didn't have to do it, so that's great. All right, Brian, why don't you go ahead and give us the presentation, and then we'll entertain a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The staff recommendation is for approval of ordinance 2019-13. Just a brief history. Our current regulations require that all structures be within the building setback lines, which are in residential typically 10 feet on the sides to 15 feet on the rear property lines. Applicants, if they want to put a structure, say like a utility shed or a carport, into the building setbacks, have to apply for a variance, and they're supposed to be able to demonstrate some sort of a hardship that's based on the property and not actions of their own doing. In other words, not just because they want to have a shed in a specific location. The variance application costs about $200, which covers the cost of advertising for the public hearings. Takes about, just because of the process, takes about 2 months to process. In the meantime, they're waiting. And since looking back about 2014, no variance of this type has yet to be denied. And there have been, to my knowledge, no opposition presented by any of the neighbors. We do a mail out to all of the surrounding neighbors for all variances. And we've never had any neighbors show up and say, we did not want our neighbors to put a shed or a carport closer to the property line. The commission in the past has expressed an interest in lightening this burden on the residents, and so staff has come forward with a amendment to the code which would allow for the building, the carports and sheds that are of a more temporary nature. By that I mean they would not be mounted on concrete foundations or would not be mounted on concrete slabs, but they're the kind where you can get over at the shed store or at Nelson's, where they bring it in on a skid and set it up and anchor it down, but it's not considered permanent. And then also some of the like the aluminum awning type carports arrangements. And so the amendment recommends that we would allow those to go within 5 feet of the property line instead of the 10 or the 15 feet in the rear. Sheds would be limited, as they're limited currently in the land development regulations, to rear yards. They'd still be limited to rear yards, but they could go within 5 feet of both the rear or side setback lines of the property line. And the reason to maintain that 5-foot separation is because if you have 5 feet on each side of the property line, then you meet the minimum 10-foot building structure separation required by the fire safety code. And so it still meets that, but it gives a lot more leeway and hopefully eliminates the need for a lot of variances that we've brought forward in the past. So as an example, your typical property line that's scaled to about 15 feet on the back and 10 feet on the front. Current ordinance would require the shed to be located there and the carport to be located no closer than there. This would allow the movement of those structures a little bit farther out, take up less of the yard, which is what people are usually trying to accomplish. They want to put the shed as far back as they can so it doesn't take up too much of the back or side yard. And with that, the Planning and Zoning Board did vote unanimously to recommend approval to the Commission on the amendments to the land development regulations.
Okay. Does the board have any questions for Brian? Commissioner Farnsworth?
Is it retroactive?
Mr. Mayor, we hadn't anticipated any retroactive, but
we've
certainly
never turned them down.
Any that are in process, we would apply this ordinance to change to.
I mean, somebody that had done it before, they wouldn't have to come in and pay the $200 to come before us?
Oh, I'm
again?
sorry, I misunderstood. Yes, sir. Yeah, if somebody's got one of these structures in the rear within 5 feet, they would be allowed to comply with this as opposed to having to get a variance.
And also, this doesn't include anything like above-ground swimming pools or anything of that nature, does it?
Mr. Marino, it doesn't really anticipate above-ground swimming pools, but I guess it could be amended further to bring that forward, but.
I mean, can somebody put in an above-ground swimming pool within 5 feet of a property line with this ordinance?
The pool is supposed to stay within the building setback lines. It wasn't anticipated in these amendments.
That falls under a different section.
A little bit different section of the Florida Building Code in terms of the permit required, and it has some different considerations than a shed that sits in the corner or a carport would.
If you guys are interested in that, this sort of came about at the P&Z. I think it was Mayor Conrad who said, you know, we issue these approvals all the time when people come in and they want to move it back, and we never say no. But I think what the P&Z did was ask Brian to go back and research, make sure that we never say no, bring the consideration. So if you want to think about other types of setbacks, maybe give them a chance to go back and see if there's any red flag that you guys wanted to consider before you.
I mean, something like a swimming pool, I wouldn't want within 5 feet. I think the
Right.
15 feet setback is.
Kids are splashing, loud.
Loud noise.
Yeah.
But, okay.
You can get into a splash fight with your neighbor at 5 feet.
Or you could build a splash park for the citizens in the area.
Commissioner Martin, we're going to move right off from that comment. Yep.
I appreciate the time you guys spend trying to figure this out. This is definitely one of those easier things that we can just get off the plate of everybody for the most part. So at this, moving forward, these people won't even need to apply, or what?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, that's correct. As long as they maintain a 5-foot separation from the property line in the for sheds in the rear yard, backyard, and for carports, it can also be in the side yard.
Okay.
Carports can also be in the front yard too, but they would still. That doesn't change that they have to meet the front yard setbacks.
And if that $200 was essentially sort of a pass-through on advertising, it's not really going to have a budgetary impact, but if it does, because we're doing a few of them, just kind of keep that in mind going into the next cycle. But yeah, if it's just a pass-through, then it's kind of a wash anyway.
And Brian, people will still need the permit that they get for the shed. They just won't have to come for a variance to put it closer to the property line.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That actually was the next thing I wanted to bring up was this doesn't address the requirement to have a building permit for the shed or the carport. We're also looking at that as a next step for the potential to allow certain sized sheds like this not to require. If they're pre-engineered and they're under a certain square footage, then they wouldn't require a building permit as well. It's a little more complicated in that respect because you have to actually amend further ordinances related to our adoption of the Florida Building Code. We've narrowed down what the process is, and so we'll be bringing forth a
Commissioner Martin
on that as well.
On that train of thinking, just to pre-comment, I guess, on that, I would be in favor of, because most of those pre-engineered ones have to have some pretty stringent requirements. I would not want to have Joe Homemaker out there building their own thing necessarily that kind of fits the temporary fix, but the pre-engineered ones I don't really necessarily have any problem with.
Commissioner Norfleet.
On this ordinance here, does it address the public utility easements and stuff that may be in the backyards or on the side?
Mr. Mayor, it doesn't address public utility easements. You're absolutely right. There are some in the backyards and side yards. We try to avoid that when the neighborhoods are being platted. It's best practice to keep all of those easements in the front. But in a situation where there is it might even be an unknown public utility easement, if the structure was placed over that and there was some sort of an emergency where they had to access a water line or something, They would basically have to move the structure out of the way until it was repaired.
And, Mr. Mayor, this would not move the line. This would not supersede a PUE. We have a public utility easement that's 10 foot wide across someone's property and you're not allowed to have a structure in there, then the 10 foot wide would prevail. The PUE would supersede. They work independently.
Did that answer your question? Any further questions for staff from the dais? Okay, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve on first reading ordinance 2019-13.
So moved. 2019-13.
I have a motion from Commissioner Martin, a second from Commissioner Farnsworth. Any questions from the dais on the motion on the floor? Does the public have any questions on the motion on the floor? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Just want to let folks watching at home, we are aware of some power outages and some trees down. We do have employees that are taking care of that as we are in here conducting our business. We will move on to legislative public hearing, first reading of ordinance 2019-14, which is another application by the City of Newberry, amending the Newberry, Florida Code ordinances about historic sites and structure preservation. Madam Attorney, would you please read that by title only for us?
This is ordinance number 2019-14, an ordinance of the City of Newberry, Florida, amending the text of the City of Newberry Land Development Regulations as amended to amend Section 11.11, approval of changes to landmarks and landmark sites, providing an administrative approval process for specified types of changes, providing approval criteria, severability, repealing all ordinance in conflict, and providing an effective date.
Thank you, Madam Attorney. All right. Wendy, glasses off. You're ready to go? All right.
I am. Thank you. The staff recommended action for this application is for approval of the ordinance on first reading. And essentially, the situation is that in our historic district, in our regulations, it requires that people who make changes that are visible to the public on the exterior of their buildings, that are visible, those changes have to go before the Historic Architectural Review Board. And to do that, it goes through a public hearing process. And most of the applications that are coming before them often they're just for minor things, like changing a shingle to a metal roof, that type of thing. And it's typically things that are, already in compliance with the regulations as they are and compatible with the surrounding properties. So essentially, because of all of that going on, the Historic Architectural Review Board directed staff to go ahead and come up with some language that might work to have it, an administrative process so that staff could approve some of these if they met certain criteria, and not have to take it back through the public hearing process and not take so much time and streamline that whole process. Minor changes are some of the things that we're looking at that would be able to be looked at by staff, and some of those things are replacement of existing features, accessory structures, decks, fences, walls if there was a sign, applications for actions that are other than minor types of changes would still go before the Historic Architectural Review Board. And an advantage of that is it will shorten the time period for people who are applying for a certificate of appropriateness. They can just get it through staff if this is approved, and it would save anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks in the timeline for them to get their approval and go on and make their changes. So the purpose of this application is to change our code to allow for that administrative process, that staff would be able to approve certificates of appropriateness. In this case, the proposed language addresses things like those who, actions that are, well, let me say that if it's not eligible for an administrative type approval from staff, it would automatically go to the city of, to the Historic Architectural Review Board for their approval. And if there was any question, even if the administrators thought, well, I'm not sure if this really is that easy, or if it's kind of a gray area, or if the person questions the LDR administrator's determination, they can take it back before the Historic Architectural Review Board meeting through the board. So applications that are denied also could go back through the board if the person would like to do that. We mentioned the types of changes, and that if they're denied, that they can go back forward through the HARB. And review of those minor changes, we would be looking at consistency with the goals and objectives, policies of the comprehensive plan, and there are specific sections that in our vision sub-element and future land use element, and making sure that it's consistent with the surrounding properties, consistent with the Florida vernacular style, and compatibility with the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation. The Planning and Zoning Board heard this proposed amendment to the code and recommended approval. They did recommend that an additional whereas clause be added to show that the Historic Architectural Review Board actually recommended and directed staff to prepare these amendments to streamline that process. And that was added and is in the draft ordinance that's attached to your packet. As I said, the staff recommendation is for approval of the ordinance, which would be the first reading this time, and then you would go on, if you approve this, then to the second reading.
This is another initiative that the HARB is pretty proud of and trying to streamline the process. So, and just to be clear, if, you know, these are for things that are kind of no-brainers. You know, we had a house over here that was originally 100 years ago had a metal roof, but then went to shingles. But when they tried to go back to a metal roof, well, now they're in the historic district. The process forced everyone to go through the process. So this would allow staff to say, historically, that had a metal roof. You know, you're returning it to its historic nature. If I'm replacing something that's an identical window, staff can approve that without having to go through the process. And the people will always have the option, if they don't like what staff says, to then work through the process. So you guys aren't removed, the P&Z isn't removed, the HARB isn't removed completely. It just acts as a check to make sure that everyone is doing what they should be doing. So are there any questions from the commission? Commissioner Farnsworth first.
I've noticed some changes over several years, like storefronts being changed, painting of buildings, removal of houses that were in the historic district. What kind of fines, or is there any kind of repercussions for these people not following the law?
In this case, when we have the historic district and it has those regulations, they are to provide proof of what they're doing and to come in and ask ahead of time and propose what changes they're going to make. You're right. Most of these changes that have been made were caught, like you're talking about, some of those things that were done after the fact. They had to come in and get reviewed again and get an after-the-fact permit. I don't know, there is no process for a fine, if you will. If they do violate the building code, then that's another issue. Because this approval process does not take away from the building permit process. You still have to go through and get all of those permits. Any demolition has to come before the Historic Architectural Review Board. If anything is done without the permit, they do have to go back before the HARB.
A couple of those projects that I think you might be thinking of actually did go before the HARB, but the HARB is the final decision maker on those. So whereas most things that go to the P&Z then come to you guys, what goes in front of the HARB is decided at the HARB, and that's the final say.
Yeah, but once a building is removed, I mean, what you're going to do, you can't put it back together.
Right.
And once the storefront is changed or stucco is put on the side of a wall, I mean, what are you going to do then?
Mr. Mayor, just to offer, our code is enforced through our codes enforcement processes. So it would be handled just like any other code violation in town. Now, granted, that not necessarily a lot of peace of mind as to how do you put the genie back in the bottle, but that is the mechanism that we have for enforcing all of our ordinances. Is if someone's in violation, we identify it, we address them, we ask them to restore it. It is not beyond the city's purview and the special magistrate to require something to be restored that violates our HARB. You know, if someone were to switch to a metal roof from shingles or vice versa, it's within the HARB's, I mean, the special magistrate's purview to correct that. Or someone changes the storefront, it's within his purview to make them correct that, at least to be in keeping with what would be approved by HARB. If the HARB said we never would have approved that, or the city commission says we never would have approved that, then the special magistrate could take that type of ruling. But stop work orders, things of that nature, are not within our ability to do without it taking on some sort of liability. And so we would follow just our normal code enforcement processes.
Is there currently any mechanism in place to notify businesses that are coming into that district that they have to comply with certain regulations?
Mr. Mayor, that has been an issue that we've identified. Well, I didn't know. I was in a historic district, and legally that falls into, it's incumbent upon a property owner to know, you know, that ignorance is no excuse for violation of the law. But because we run into that enough, our first means of protection is for the building department to be aware of all the properties that are in our historic district, so that if someone requests a permit, that we can give them a heads up. And I don't think it's in place yet, but it is underway that when a building official identifies a parcel that has applied for a building permit, we're supposed to get a red warning that pops up and says, hey, this is in the historic district, so please, you know, proceed with knowledge. So that is coming. But what also is coming is adding a layer to our website so that all people that, as you're perusing our website, especially in the building department, planning department area, there'd be a map of the historic district, and if you live in the historic district, you would be able to identify it at a parcel level. You'd be able to click on it, and it would check you off as you're in the historic district or you're not. Am I covering all, is that
That's
accurate?
correct. Yes, and currently, when the building department goes through looking at property or building permit application, they do check the actual district and the list of properties at this time, but it'll be very helpful to have it pop up.
And just one thing, the building department being aware, that is kind of another issue that we face from time to time, that a lot of renovations we didn't even know the building permit was required. So we find a lot of renovation type work underway where we have to advise them that, hey, there's building permit requirement and there's HARB approval requirement. Sometimes you see, like for the instance that we're talking about here, I've seen metal roofing material lay on the ground for months because someone didn't know they needed a building permit to re-roof a house, and then they didn't know they needed HARB approval, and we discovered it the day after the HARB meeting, and now they got to wait 29 days to get to the next HARB meeting. So
we don't want that to happen.
And that's kind of what this initiative will hopefully prevent. Are there any more questions for Wendy from the dais? Commissioner Martin?
Just compliments to bringing this forward to us. I definitely think it's something that can be handled at a staff level. And I think we set enough precedent and have enough conversations back and forth that you kind of understand the appetite that the dais has and doesn't have for those sorts of things. So appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any more questions or comments from the dais? If not, Madam Clerk, do we have a motion on this yet? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve first reading of ordinance 2019-14. I have a motion from Commissioner Farnsworth, a second from Commissioner Herson. Any questions from the dais on the motion on the floor? Any questions from the public on the motion on the floor? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passed unanimously. Thank you, Wendy. And we're on to our agenda items. First up is Florida Municipal Power Agency Solar Project. Mayor Conrad, will you please come down and tell us about this exciting opportunity for the city of Newberry?
So this is, I think, the third time that we all have talked about the possibility of getting possibility of Newberry getting involved in the FMPA utility scale solar project. The first one we opted out of. We did a survey in 2016 that showed that our people were kind of split on it and more negative than positive on solar power, and we opted not to get involved in that. In the 3 years intervening, the cost of solar has come down. There have been a number of utility scale solar projects that have been very successful. The government has come in and is subsidizing these to the tune of about a third, and it now looks more attractive. And so we have talked about the possibility of Newberry possibly buying in as a minor partner in a large solar scale project. So I wanted to give you an update on that. We talked about it at the meeting 2 weeks ago at FMPA. Should be the next slide. Did I hit the wrong button? Ah, there it is. Okay, so because the first project was so successful, we started a second one, and we asked the 32 FMPA cities who wanted to get involved. We had 14 come forward. You can see by the map that they're diversified all over the state, from Key West to Havana, and Newberry was one of those for a very small amount. But you see the bottom line that they requested up to 140 megawatts hour. So we have enough interest for 2 75 megawatt plants. And the reason we build actually 74.5 megawatts is because when you get up above 75 megawatts, you have to have a whole bunch of siting plans, and it has to be approved by the Public Service Commission. So we try to keep them below 75 megawatts, which is a big plant. It takes 7 acres to generate 1 megawatt of solar, so it's about almost 500 acres for a 75 megawatt power plant. And just a little sideline, I think there's been some interest from some of the providers in putting a plant in Newberry, or a farm. They've looked at some of our, and you all have rezoned or allowed solar power as an exception to our agriculturally zoned land, which we have plenty of in Newberry available. So that's an exciting proposition as well. So anyway, we're moving forward with a second project, which may contain 1 or 2 75 megawatt power plants. We're moving pretty fast. We put out proposals, or RFPs, in March, and we've had 8 different bidders come back. And I think it was a very broad brush RFP, so the providers could suggest additional things as technology unfolds day by day. We talked about a 20-year or a 30-year power purchase agreement. We told the bidders that they would have to be able to connect to Duke or Florida Power and Light interconnections, which we have a Duke interconnection that the city of Newberry uses on the State Road 26 just over the Gilchrist County line. We're not allowed to talk about the amounts yet because the bids are still not open and we don't know what the bidders are going to bid. But the first project came in under $30 a megawatt hour. Our target has been less than 35 a megawatt hour, but we feel like the second one will come in even less than the first one because prices of solar panels continue to go down. They're made in China, the ones that we're getting now. There's some special heavy metals that are used in solar panels that are available in China, and they just keep getting cheaper and cheaper. But the feeling now is that they're at the rock bottom. They're almost selling at production cost, and I think there's no longer to our advantage to keep waiting for them to get cheaper. And the federal government subsidies begin to roll off in 2020. So we're really trying to get this second one underway before the end of fiscal year 2019, which ends September 31st. And then we had some supplemental questions we asked the bidders about transmission interconnection facilities called prepay options. We talked a little bit in my letters to you about the gas prepay. I'm very nervous about prepaying stuff. It's a very complicated financial derivative that has a lot of pitfalls that, basically it takes advantage of the fact that we can get tax-free municipal bonds, and then we can prepay for our solar consumption if we work with like Florida Power, who is a private company, not eligible for municipal bonds, that we can get the money cheaper than they can, and prepay to them, and they in turn would sell us the rate at the energy at a discount, and we'd get a little margin there. But I feel like the risk is pretty high that things could go wrong. Plus, we're talking about a 20 or 30-year energy project. Who knows where energy is going to be in 30 years? We might not even have power lines and power plants anymore. You may go buy a little cube at the grocery store and come home and plug it into your house. So it's a long time to be prepaying gas and it's a long time to prepay solar too. So even though that gets us a little discount, I'm not real keen on doing that. Small scale storage, and this is the interesting thing, battery storage. We've asked the company, we've always said that battery storage for solar would be great, but it's too expensive. Now they're starting to say maybe we can provide just some battery storage. That would be fantastic for us because as we've talked about many times, most of our bill in Newberry comes from demand. So if we could get all of our solar stored up for the day and then dump it in the system at our peak demand time, it would pay big dividends to all, not just the solar subscribers in Newberry, but to the whole city because it would lower our peak demand. And we asked the bidders to talk about in-service, pricing, performance guaranteed, credit assurances. Anyway, we've shortlisted 3 of the bidders. We're interviewing them in May. And here's the timeline. You can see, and it ends in September. And again, we want to get this thing started, but as long as we have the project started before 31 September, we get the federal and state tax rebates, which amounts to about a third of the cost of the project. But anyway, go ahead, Tim.
I'm sorry, you said that you had already shortlisted the bidders, but did you say earlier that the bids are still open? Are you still taking bids?
No, the bids are all in, and
Okay.
we're sorting through them and interviewing bidders.
Okay.
And I think we're down to 3. And yeah, the prices are in, but it's proprietary information, and they haven't told, but they've said to the board members, if you want to come in the back room, we'll tell you what the prices are. But it can't be put out to the public because it's, the company's not going to tell you what their lowest bid is because then that messes them up for future bidding. If they didn't get it. But the low bidder will know his price. Or not the low bidder, but the one we select. He may or may not be the low bidder because there's so many, like the storage thing and the training and the interconnection. There's much more to it than just the cost of the energy. But anyway, where we are here in May is almost over. They're wanting the cities to commit to a certain amount. We've talked about 0.67 megawatts as being enough to power our city facilities, and you all would hope would be able to make a decision on that hopefully tonight, and we'll go into more detail on that. But that's kind of where we are in the timeline. They're looking for the cities to commit in May to stay on this very tight timeline to break ground by September. In my letter that I sent to you, I talked about the possibility of us taking a small amount of solar, 2/3 to 3/4 of 1 megawatt, to provide our city facilities. And I sent you a letter this last month to say that there's 2 categories of solar that we can use. We can use it for the general fund buildings, and we can use some for the enterprise fund buildings. And they would be paid for by different subsets of your constituents. The general fund, the city buildings, this building, the rec center, all of the city facilities, and our streetlights would be under general fund, and those buildings use 782,000 kilowatts a year. The premium for solar is about $0.05 a kilowatt hour. So that would be $3,900 divided by 3,000 households, and that comes out to about $1.30 a year per household. So we could have all our cities' buildings solar powered for $1.30 a year per household, which I think is a good, and that's high. I think it'll be less than that because it.
Commissioner Farnsworth, turn your mic on.
Does that include Easton, or is that on a different?
I believe that includes Easton too.
And Easton already has some solar.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, that includes all of the buildings that are funded through the general fund. Because the bill, in order to keep our accounting straight, I always talk about we don't mix and match. If it's a cost to the utility funds, we charge our utility customers, and if it's a cost to general fund, we charge our tax base. So when we did the split, we determined which facilities were paid for out of general fund and did the math, and it turns out that, as Mayor Conrad said, it would cost each household in our tax base $1.30 per year, or 10 cents a month, roughly, and we would collect that through their tax revenues, through their ad valorem or millage rates.
But our general fund pays our utility fund an electric bill just like all the rest of us do.
Correct.
And at the Easton building, do we split the utilities with Easton, or?
Easton does not, Easton pays a portion of our telecommunications bill. They don't pay any portions of our other utility bills. But recreation is funded out of the general fund 100%, which is why those bills would be applied to our tax base.
Right. Okay. And under the enterprise fund, that would include all the city utilities, the water tower, the pumps that pump our water out of the wells, the sewer plant. Is that it?
All of our pumping stations throughout town, lift stations, things of that nature.
Sewer lift stations around town. And for that, we use even more than the city buildings, 937 kilowatt hours a year, times a nickel a kilowatt hour. Premium comes to $4,685, and we have about 1,600 utility customers, so it would come down to about $2.93 per utility ratepayer.
A year?
A year. Utility ratepayers are also citizens, so theirs would be the $3 plus another buck, so it'd be about $4 for the people who are on the utility system. In my view, that's a very nominal amount that I don't think any customer would even realize he was paying the extra 20 cents a month on his electric bill. And I think it gives the city good standing to be able to tell our city that we are environmentally conscious. If you look through the package and you look at the Great Blue study that was done in 2016, even though a lot of people didn't want to pay extra for utility, 73% of our citizens said that they were environmentally conscious and they did want to see us be as clean as we possibly can. So I think for this small amount, we could at least get our foot in the door with utilities. We could see in the next few years, if gas prices went up a little bit, and these bids come in as low as we think they're going to come in, we could see solar actually being cheaper than the traditionally powered generation. And remember, with gas, we pay for gas every day for the next 30 years. For solar, you pay it all up front, and then you don't pay any more for energy once you got the facility built. So we're going to pay it during this time where we're getting a 30% tax break. So that tax break will continue to flow with us over the 30 years that we get this power. So it's a way to kind of the gift that keeps on giving from
hedge your bets a little bit.
Yeah.
Diversify.
So anyway, I feel like it's a good opportunity, and I would recommend that you all pass tonight the permission for the staff to continue to pursue and tell FMPA that we are in it
at the .67.
0.67. Or give me a little leeway on it. Could be 0.7. It's really.
I think the backup material said 0.75.
0.75.
Am I misremembering that?
The FMPA calculated the 10 cents per month to our tax base and the 25 cents per month to our utility customers based on the 0.67. I'd round it up. I mean, I've never heard of a utility take or a solar take at the 0.67 roll. Even 0.5 is kind of iffy. So I rounded up when I wrote a staff report, and in all candor, this staff report is the same one that you received the last time we discussed this, which was maybe 4 weeks ago or 6 weeks ago. I think .67 is the number to ask for. They're willing to do it. And for scale, I tell the commission that the city's load is less than 5%. What we're talking about is less than 5% of our total electric load in Newberry. So we account for less than 5%. And of the project, what we would be asking accounts for less than 1% of one project, and it'd be less than 0.5% of the two projects. So if it is the commission's palate to kind of stick their toe in the water and test solar, this is just about as shallow as you can dip that toe. We're barely feeling the water here by taking this first project on.
Commissioner Farnsworth.
I'm confused about one thing. When you say tax breaks, who gets the tax break?
The people that are bidding on this project are non-municipalities, Florida Power, Duke, TECO, so they get the tax break, but they return it to us in form of a lower rate.
Okay. And are there any power outages when you have solar?
Yeah, lots of them, every night. Yeah, I mean, it's intermittent power. It is.
So, I mean, you can still have power outages without.
Well, I mean, that'll keep producing electricity when
the battery runs
the
up.
Substation is out. We'll have a little something coming in. Well, no.
Mr. Mayor, we are in an all requirements project, and this is being bid out of an all requirements project. So the only thing that interrupts our power is if we lose the physical power line coming into town. So whether we're in a solar project or not, we would see that outage. But if we go through a month of no sun, if we go through a month-long eclipse, we're in an all requirements project, and we're going to get our energy whether the solar field is producing or not.
I mean, I would say that in our time up here, we've seen different forms of fuel go up and down. So the ability to diversify a little bit, hedge your bets, that may be worth it in and of itself. Any questions, Commissioner Hurson?
So if we would go in at the .67 level, do we have options to move up? Should we decide we want to
Yes.
to increase our solar?
I'm not sure how that works, but we discussed it at the FMPA board, and they said, yeah, we're going to have an on-ramp for people who come along later. We're not guaranteeing the same price, but if somebody says, I want to get in, we're going to have a way to provide them. And if it continues to be as popular as it is today, they'll build more projects. If it's not very popular, people will want to back out and trade their position in the solar project with someone else.
Okay, so we could potentially have the option to move up in amount of just what.
That's what
our
they're
rate
saying.
our rate may be different.
We're so small, and FMPA's peak is over 2,000 megawatts, and our share of that is 8, less than 8. So if Orlando wanted to have another 100 megawatts, it would be a big deal. But for us, say we want to go from 3/4 to 1, I'm sure that nobody would think twice about that.
And to Mayor Conrad's point, we do have the opportunity to up our take at a later date at a rate that would probably likely be somewhat more. The commission is not limited to this consideration of .67. If the commission said, well, heck, for 35 cents a month, we're willing to do more because of the hedging and the stability. We'd know this price for the next 30 years. It's within your purview to do that, and that's what we would ask for FMPA. We're not necessarily recommending that. We're just pointing out that you could have an appetite for more than .67 megawatts. To keep it clean, if you said we want to double that, you'd know that the rate impact to our residents would be 70 cents a month instead of 35 cents a month.
But if you looked at a scenario when, let's say, gas prices went up to $9, which they were, as you remember, in 2005, and they're 2 something today, then there would be a mad rush to get into solar at these prices. So then I imagine supply and demand being what it is, the cost of solar would probably go up, and we could get in, but it would be more than it's going to cost us today.
Any further questions for Bill? Commissioner Martin?
Mr. Mayor, are there any possibilities for the price of solar to go down to where we're paying way more than market rate or anything like that?
I don't think so. They're saying that because the tax, we're getting it at 30% discount or 33% discount in the state and local, or state and federal grants, which go away in 2020, and that we've seen the cost of the panels come from way up here to way down here, and they're very close to the cost of production right now. And with potential tariffs coming and these kind of things, the only way to go from this level is back up. So this is what FMPA staff is recommending, is that this is probably the lowest the market's ever going to get for solar.
I do remember vaguely the original discussion, and what sticks out to me most was the idea of let other people try it, and we'll pick up later on when everybody kind of works out the kinks. From what I'm hearing, that seems to have been kind of done.
Yes. Well, the first solar project isn't producing yet, but the construction's well underway. Other solar projects, if you come into Florida down I-95, you see these big solar farms on either side of the road. Florida Power and Light is way into solar, and they're just building more as fast as they can because it has worked out well for them. And we're only talking about utility scale solar. Rooftop solar is a whole different ballgame. People are trying to sell you rooftop solar and telling you that it's going to pay off in a couple of years. They say in a couple of years you won't be paying anything for electricity. That is just not true. Rooftop solar is about 3 times as expensive as utility scale solar because it's your roof doesn't face the ideal direction. It faces which way it faces. So they put it on your roof and the sun's over here, so you don't get the full force of the sun. Whereas this utility scale solar, they're on rotating panels and they follow the sun across the sky, and they get the maximum production out of the sun all the time.
And it's economies of scale.
Yeah, and just the economy of scale. Having to put a little 200 kilowatt panel array of panels on every house, and it generates DC electricity, and then you've got to convert it to AC through a inverter that's very inefficient because it's bought at Home Depot instead of the big industrial type. All of those things keep rooftop much higher.
Is there any way for the ratepayer to recover the quarter or the nickel or even more? Or this is really just you're paying a few pennies to basically have the self-gratification of knowing that you're using solar.
Right.
The latter?
Yeah, and I mean, they won't, like the general fund, it'll add $1 to your taxes, $1 a year per person to your taxes, and you probably won't even know that that's there. To the utility ratepayers, it'll add $3 a year to their, average person paying about $125 a year for electricity, and that's a quarter a month. So you add a quarter to $125, and it's going to be not even felt. And I don't think anybody's going to look to get that money back.
Bill, will you speak a little bit, because I know one of the things you were looking for in the bid package is the batteries and the ability to store, which could then, like you were saying, you dump that power back at your peak, bring that peak cost way down. Is that, I know Tesla's out there doing some amazing things. Is that something that is actually on the horizon, or is that, a hope?
I would say, this is a 20 to 30 year power purchase agreement. I would say sometime in the next 30 years, it's almost a certainty that battery storage will become, if we continue using electricity the way we do today, I think it's coming. I know it's coming.
That was actually what I was what I was thinking was because of that storage, if we can bring the peak demand price down, that will actually save money if I'm not correct, right?
I think it will. It's not, solar is only less than 1% of our total load, so it's not going to plummet the price, but it'll offset the cost. So instead of saying it's costing us $1.30 a customer, we'll say it's saving us $1.30.
Mr. Mayor, I think an analogy is somewhere around the late 90s, 2000, solar panels began to gain in popularity at utility scale. GRU did a big initiative, and they were paying $300 a megawatt for solar energy through a feed-in tariff. It was not cost effective at that time. It was several-fold more expensive than conventional energy, which was in the $85. So it was 4 times more expensive. But had those projects not happened back in the turn of the century, to develop the mentality back in the early 2000s, the technology developed because of that. And that was also followed by government incentives, the tax abatements that people see now to spur the interest, and enough interest so that solar would then be able to compete with regular power at the level that it does today, conventionally fossil fuel power. Batteries, in my opinion, are going to follow the same trajectory. They're going to be not efficient enough to begin with, and they're going to be expensive. And through these types of projects and through government subsidies and research grants, they'll drive the technology, and somewhere in that 15 to 20 year period, they'll begin to approach utility scale power. And I think, as Bill said, somewhere beyond year 30, they're almost a given. It's an absolute that battery and solar will be a major player somewhere beyond year 30.
Okay, so we spent a lot of time on this. We may have some public that wants to comment, but we need a motion on the floor to open it up. Does anyone want to offer a motion to authorize staff to go in at the 0.7 level?
I'd actually make a motion that we go in at the even 1 megawatt.
At an even 1. I have a second. I have a motion from Commissioner Barton, a second from Commissioner Herson. Any comments from the dais on the motion on the floor? Okay, we'll go to the public. Anyone want to talk about the City of Newberry diversifying our electric? Come on down to the podium, sir. Don't forget.
Jacob Leibowitz, been Alachua County resident majority of my life. Now I'm out on Watermelon Pond. I've been in the solar industry for just about 5 years. So obviously I'm extremely biased towards it and look at the numbers and everything.
And you just happen to be here tonight.
Yeah, well, I saw a thing about it.
Wonderful. Thank you for coming.
Probably instant messenger or something listening to me talking about solar, and then it pops up. So the AI stuff going on. So I see it. This is just like kind of initially like a pilot project, I assume. I do think batteries will set this off, like solar in general, and it's happening faster than we know or think. I'm over in the Jacksonville area, and just seeing it explode over there. You can go in one new development like we have in here, and it's 15 rooftops getting it. That's, some of these companies are putting a bad name and selling the wrong payout, but realistically it's about 7 years if it's cash purchased. And on these large scale, it is about 4 years, could be less. But I'm wondering about the bidding process. Is this bidding on municipality or on the power company, or is this bidding closed? Is that closed on them bidding it and then subbing it out to companies locally, or?
I'm going to defer to the manager to answer that. I'm not sure if he knows.
This is a utility scale project, so the site for this project is not yet determined, and it may be 2, but we're seeing them pop up somewhere, usually in Central Florida. So this bidding's been going on for probably 60 days. It's open, it has been open to anybody, but utility scale projects, we're talking 500 acres worth of solar panels.
So is this one proposed, I was,
It
maybe I
won't be here.
misunderstood. Is it,
Right.
in Newberry, is it just to be like a portion and be like
Yep.
not even a megawatt here?
We're not even a megawatt, and we're
Sure.
receiving all of the energy via transmission system, but through the grid.
Right,
You know,
right.
there's not going to be solar panels in Newberry.
Okay, it'd just be like purchasing it from them other, I thought there was
Correct.
gonna be a site here in Newberry.
Well, we did just approve a brand-new zoning package to have a solar farm, and as the mayor mentioned, we have had some interest in it, but that's a separate
Okay.
issue.
Right on. I
Yeah.
was reading this, I'm thinking there's gonna be a project locally. and then
Well, we
I'll-
hope there will be.
We'd like it.
Yeah,
we
yeah,
hope
I'd
there
like
will
it
be
to be
soon.
too, and maybe hopefully
Yeah.
have this discussion further later.
Awesome.
Or if I can help steer us in the right direction, I'd like to.
All right. Thank you,
All
sir.
right,
We
thank you.
appreciate you coming out. Any more public comment on going into solar at the 1 level? Mr. Manager? Knowing we've been
Mr.
on
Ma-
this for about 30 minutes now.
Mr. Mayor, I did just some quick math. That equates to about 52 cents a month for utility customers and taxpayers combined.
Okay. Any further public comment? Any, with that additional information? Okay. If there's no more comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Here, motion passes unanimously. Okay, thank you. And Bill, you're not going very far, or is Mike going to do the? He's going to do it. Bill, you're back up for the liaison report, unless you just want to shoot it in an email to us.
Unless you have any questions.
Does the commission have any questions for the liaison report, which was emailed to us about a week ago?
Yeah, and I spent a lot of time talking about noncompliance with municipal websites. And I didn't know at the time, Tim told me that the city of Newberry had been found in noncompliance, so.
A lot of municipalities have.
Yeah. And I urge you to use FMPA's lawyers. We have great attorneys, but we don't have to pay for FMPA's lawyers.
Wow.
And they've got a couple of the legal team already hunting this down. So if you have legal needs, I would urge you to consult Jody or Dan at FMPA, and they're pretty far along down the road already.
All right. Any other questions for Bill on the liaison report? All right. Thank you, sir. We appreciate that. That's great advice. Okay, well, I'll move us to Resolution 2019-16, which is amending Resolution 2018-19, Resolution 2017-14, and Resolution 2017-17, Resolution of the City of Newberry, Florida, appointing members to the Planning and Zoning Board of the City of Newberry and establishing calendar year appointment terms. Now, we have 2 issues here, and we actually have 3 questions, and we're going to try to move through them one at a time and do this in as smooth and fluid a way as possible. And what I would recommend is let Brian give us the overview about how we want the structure of the HARB and the P&Z to be. Let's make that decision first, and then we have some applicants here who I'm sure who were not here the last time, and even the ones who braved the weather may want to come back up and reintroduce themselves. But let's get an answer to the structure of the P&Z and the HARB first. And Brian, you want to explain that question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Basically, the Planning and Zoning Board has, for several years now, has been serving also as the Historic Architectural Review Board. I think most of y'all are probably aware of that. And so when a vacancy comes up on the Planning and Zoning Board, by default, the vacancy also has come up on the Historic Architectural Review Board. There are a total of 6 members of the Planning and Zoning Board. There's actually a couple of extra spots that are on the Historic Architectural Review Board that could be filled if the board so chooses. And so
the 6 spots on the P&Z include myself, so there's 5 seats besides the mayor.
Yes, sir. Probably, the mayor is an ex officio position, non-voting. and the other 5 members of the Planning and Zoning Board vote.
It's getting too late at night, it's getting tired.
It must be. Anyway, that's okay. There are 3 openings as of April 30th on the Planning and Zoning Board and the Historic Architectural Review Board. And so the vacancies were advertised in Alachua County today, as well as emailed to over 200 of our subscribers to the city's notification list. Applications are due and taken by April 17th. And we received 6 applications for people interested in serving on the Planning and Zoning Board, and a total of 8 for the HARB. 6 of the Planning and Zoning Board and HARB, and then 2 extras interested in serving on the HARB only. Due to the similarity in purpose of the functions of the 2 boards, as I mentioned, in the past they have served as the same members of each board, have served on each board. Just as a clarification, though, it is not a requirement that the 2 boards be the same. For practicality's sake and sometimes for lack of additional applicants, it's been very convenient to do that.
Let me stop you there, Brian, because just so that we make sure we move through this one step at a time. The very first question that we need guidance on is directly what Brian just said. Is it the will of the commission that the 5 members of the P&Z also be the 5 members of the HARB, and to keep that level of continuity the same? And I would remind you that the 5 members of the P&Z just underwent a lot of training when it comes to historical preservation, so they're well versed to serve in both boards, and they generally meet at the same time. So if the P&Z meets, the HARB meets right after, and the HARB does not meet with the same regularity that the P&Z meets. The P&Z meets once a month, the HARB meets as needed. So is it the will of this board that the 5 members of the P&Z will default to the 5 members of the HARB? And I think we can do this with a head nod.
And I just wanted to add, Mr. Mayor, that is what staff's recommendation would be, is to maintain that similarity of the 2 boards, that whoever gets the commission appoints to the Planning and Zoning Board, they would also appoint to serve on the Historic Architectural Review Board, with the addition of going ahead and filling those extra 2 historic.
Well, we'll ask that question next. I want to keep it. Okay. So do I have a head nod that the 5 members of the P&Z will be the default 5 members of the HARB? Commissioner Farnsworth? Do you have a logical reason for saying no?
I think it needs some diversification.
From the P&Z and the HARB? Okay. You want to expound on that, or just want diversification? Okay. Anybody else agree with Commissioner Farnsworth?
Having served on both boards, I believe that the continuity is actually beneficial, because oftentimes issues are coming to the P&Z and the HARB, and as I recall, a lot of them aren't necessarily separate, and so
they do have a lot of overlap.
There's a considerable amount of overlap in terms of what those 2 boards are seeing, and so I actually don't see any reason to separate the 2.
Okay, so I guess we probably need a motion then in order to, is that right? Okay, so any other thoughts on the question of whether the 5 P&Z, who again just went and were trained on historical preservation, should default to be the 5? And the next question will be, do you want to add those other 2, which could answer Commissioner Farnsworth's question about diversification of opening up. Any more thoughts on that?
Yeah.
Commissioner Martin?
Remedy this conflict that I have about, I was impressed with Dr. Gazeda's introduction at the last, but she doesn't want to
be on the
serve on the P&Z board, and it's always been kind of the will of the commission to try to get as many people involved as possible in different things. So how do we remedy that scenario?
If you add the 2 additional seats on the HARB, which will be the next question, then you could appoint Ms. Gazda, You could appoint her to the HARB, so she would serve on the board she wants to serve on without serving on the board that she does not want to serve on. Which would not negate the question in front of you about whether or not the original 5 would default. Now, it would if you don't add the 2 additional seats on the HARB, then that she would not be able to serve because she's not applied to be on the P&Z.
But I think we got to make this decision excluding the names of the people. Because
I would agree.
people will come and go off of those boards, and so I don't think we make a decision based on one person's desire to be on one board and not the other board.
I'll tell you, as someone who sat on a lot of committees here in Newberry, for committees that don't meet on a regular monthly basis, it's hard to keep the committee members engaged and showing up. So if you have a board like the HARB that only meets once every 3 or 4 months, you often times have a hard time getting a quorum. The P&Z meets every single month. It's pretty regular. You'll always have those folks, so you'd always at least have a quorum. Commissioner Martin?
Well, to Commissioner Hersum's point, I don't really necessarily want to make this decision in a vacuum, but if we had them serving together and we add 2 positions to the HARB, it kind of almost makes a hybrid which provides for the diversification that Commissioner Farnsworth talking about. So we kind of have 2 boards, but significant overlap.
Correct.
Okay.
Commissioner Farnsworth, are you reaching for the mic again?
Yeah. Why can't the P&Z have the same amount of people on it as the HARB does?
Well, we just went through the reworking of that ordinance, and we said it's by ordinance or resolution, that it's by ordinance that it would be 5 members. So in order to expand the P&Z, we'd have to go back and work through that entire process again.
How about decreasing the amount of the HARB?
Well, right now, there's only 5 on the HARB, because the default has been if you're on the P&Z, you're automatically appointed to the HARB. So you don't have to add the other 2. You can just leave it the way it is, and we would just move forward with appointing 3 people here tonight. So that's why there's multiple layers to this question. We have to sort of answer one at a time before we can go to the next one. But the next one will be, do you want to add those 2? And I think this has come up because there is the ability on the HARB to specifically go after some pointed skill sets. And so that's why the HARB in their training and staff has brought that option back to you guys to say, the HARB doesn't just have to be the P&Z. You could make it a 7-person board, and you could go after some specific skills to amplify that board. Commissioner Martin?
If we move it to the 7, does that give us a better opportunity to have a quorum on the infrequency that it does meet?
I don't think we've ever had a problem with a quorum on the P&Z because the P&Z, those folks are pretty committed. And so you'd always have 5. You'd need 4 if you move the board to 7 for a quorum.
But that's just on the HARB versus...
Correct.
I actually, if I'm not mistaken, the language for the HARB only requires 3 for a quorum.
Only 3 for a quorum?
Yes, sir.
Are you done, Commissioner Martin? While you formulate that? Just trying to figure out how 3 is more than half of 7. Commissioner Norfleet?
With the previous ordinance that we did with the historical, how many issues would be coming in front of the HARB board now?
Mr. Mayor, that's an excellent question, and there would be fewer.
Yeah.
And so it really would only be in a situation where someone was going to do a substantial alteration of the exterior of their building, which was in the historic district or on the list of contributing structures. So likely there will be somewhat even less need for HARB to meet.
How many of those new nature issues have come up over the last few years?
The majority of the certificate of appropriateness requests have probably fallen within the minor category, so they could now be approved administratively as opposed to the official process. So very few would be coming forward.
Okay, since we have some disagreement, I need a motion about, and the question is, should the 5 members of the P and Z default automatically to be the 5 members of the HARB, especially given the recent conversation about the HARB meeting even less frequently now?
I move that the 5 P and Z board members are automatically represented on the HARB board.
Okay, I have a motion to default the members of the P and Z to the HARB. Do I have a second for that motion? I have a second from Commissioner Martin. Is there any more questions on the dais about the motion on the floor? Commissioner Martin?
Yeah, I think Commissioner Norfleet makes a good point. The members who wish to contribute at least to the HARB that were not interested in the P and Z board, still nothing prevents them from coming and speaking on behalf. They can offer their opinions on anything. They just wouldn't necessarily be a voting member. In light of that, that's why I've moved to second Commissioner Hersum's motion.
Any other questions on the dais on the motion on the floor? Does the public have any questions on the motion on the floor? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Roll call, Commissioner Hersum.
Aye.
Commissioner Farnsworth.
Aye.
Commissioner Martin.
Aye.
Commissioner Norfleet. Motion passes 3-1 with Commissioner Farnsworth in dissent. Now, the second question is, should we add 2 more seats to the HARB? Should we utilize that opportunity and add 2 more seats, which would bring the HARB up to 7, or should we allow it to continue going with the 5?
Mr. Mayor, if I may, certainly staff appreciates Commissioner Farnsworth's desire to add some additional participation on the HARB, and so for that reason, the staff does recommend that we add those 2 seats.
And we do right now sort of uniquely have 2 people who are willing to serve on the HARB who have not applied to serve on the P and Z. Now, I'm not sure that we would always have that success rate of having people who would be willing to come and just serve on the HARB. Brian, what happens if we add 2 additional seats and the next time a seat opens up, we can't fill it, we can't find someone? Do we just move forward with 1 vacant seat as long as we have a quorum? Or
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we can move forward with the filled seats.
Because you would always at least have 5 from the P and Z. Okay. Any thoughts from the dais about adding 2 additional seats? We'll probably need to do all these by motion, just so we...
If Commissioner Farnsworth wants to tender the motion, I'll happily support him with a second.
Commissioner Farnsworth, would you like to increase some diversity on the HARB?
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Farnsworth. And
So seconded.
I have a second from Commissioner Martin. Are there any other questions on adding 2 seats to the HARB from the dais? Any public questions or comments on adding 2 seats to the HARB? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Okay, so now we have a 5-member board of the P and Z who will default to 5 members of the HARB. 3 of those applications are up for to be filled. So we're going to vote on 3 people out of the 6 in front of you on the ballots. And if you have made notes on your ballot and you need a fresh ballot, we have extra copies. Commissioner Barton might need. So we're going to vote on these separate. I know you have 2 ballots in front of you, or they're in 2 columns. Just put your markings for the P and Z first. So if you would, I'm sorry, we're going to use this time now to let the folks who are here come up and introduce themselves to you. And then after everybody's had a chance to give their spiel, you'll mark your top 3 just on the P and Z. Miss Judy and Miss Wendy will tally those votes, and we'll announce who are the people who will fill those 3. Then we'll have a separate on D on our agenda to vote for the HARB, which is the second column. Okay, is that clear? All right, we have multiple applicants here tonight. Would any like to, maybe ladies first, Ms. Glanzer, would you like to come up and introduce yourself to the commission and tell us a little bit why you want to serve on the P&Z?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I didn't know we were going to speak tonight, but my name is Joy Glanzer, and prior to being on the city commission, I was chair of the planning and zoning for a couple of years, I think, and I served on it before then. I've been active in the city for many years in many different capacities and being aware of the regulations and ordinances that run our city through my business, which is real estate. So I've enjoyed serving on it, and I hope I have the pleasure again. But if not, I'll serve in other places. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, and I believe, Naeem, you had a chance to introduce yourself before. Did you want to reiterate any of that, or are you comfortable with your?
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, staff, thank you very much for having us and opening this up. First off, I do want to thank you for appointing me last year when Commissioner Hersom did vacate the seat because he became Commissioner Hersom. I do appreciate the honor of serving and being appointed. I have learned quite a lot through my year. Being next to Mayor Conrad definitely has taught me plenty on the real estate nature of both planning and zoning and historic. I did mention before, I do have commercial underwriting experience. I have 7 lines of businesses under my belt as trained to understand underwriting guidelines. I recently became an assistant account manager for a commercial line agency. So my extensive knowledge of commercial continues to grow. It is my passion. It's what I love to do. Ultimately, it would be an honor to continue to serve my community in this fashion. I wish to continue to move forward if you wish to appoint me again, and I will continue to do so with honor. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Gavin, would you like to come back up and remind the commission?
Good evening. Thank you, guys. I'm Gavin Johnson. I'm a commercial real estate broker. So my reason for applying for planning and zoning was because of my experience in retail site selection. Worked with Wawa and Publix. I mentioned that at the last meeting. So excited to work with the city and serve in that capacity.
Thank you, sir. Mayor Conrad, would you like to? You talked enough tonight? Yeah. Okay. So remember, we're just, and I will need you to sign your ballots after the tally is done. They will become public record. Just on the P&Z side, which is the side of your ballot sheet that has 2 people X'd out because they did not apply for the P&Z, just check your 3 people that you want on. And as soon as you are, Miss Judy, if you would step in front, as soon as you have your 3, if you would hand them to Miss Judy, and she'll take them back to Wendy. And while they tally those, we will take a 2-minute recess, Miss Amy. If anyone needs to use the restroom, be a perfect time. And just for clarity's sake, I'm a non-voting mayor, so I do not vote on these issues as well. We are down 1 commissioner, so we will have 4 tally sheets, and we printed off extra ballots just in case there were ties. None of that now.
What happens with a tie? What happens with a tie?
Well, hopefully we won't get tied from. Hopefully we'll get one or two take those out. And do those.
We're gonna have a dance break. Those 10? The rentals, right? But it's not torn. If it's not torn.
He can
see it all a mess. Holy crap.
Wow.
Those tents are like puzzles. It's not like they've got.
Have the results for the P and Z. Congratulations to Gavin Johnson, Bill Conrad, and Linda Woodcock. You will fill the 3 open seats. And now we will do the same thing for the HARB. We don't need any more further communication, correct, about that process. So Bill Conrad, Gavin, and Linda will fill the 3 seats on the HARB. We still have 2 seats to put on the HARB, which could be Naeem, Joy Glanzer, Jason McGehee, Peggy Loy, and Stephanie Gazda. Those are your votes for the HARP. So if you need new ballot sheets, don't forget to sign these as well as soon as you have your, and we're only nominating 2, so just put an X next to 2 names to serve on the HARB. You have available to you Naeem, Stephanie, Joy, Peggy, and Jason.
Vote. Gavin, Bill, and Linda.
Gavin and Linda.
Okay.
And if anyone is in the audience and was really only willing to serve on the HARB because they were on the P&Z and you're not willing to serve on the HARB, if you could tell us that now, we would. Okay. And as soon as you're done, put those up, then we'll take just two this time. We'll take another 2 minutes.
Dance break.
Yes. Fourth. With the committee members in the resolution to finalize. Once we have all the names, we got to go back to C and D and actually vote on the resolutions now that we have the names to fill them. Okay, folks, we would like to congratulate Naeem. He will sit on the Harb, and we have a tie for the second one. So if you could pass out another round of ballots, please. And now we will cross out Bill, Naeem, Gavin, and Linda. So now the second round of ballots will be between Stephanie, Joy, Peggy, and Jason. This is still public. Now vote just for one. Just for one. That's part of the public record. Yeah. And this is why copies. Wait. Do you need this, Madam Attorney? You got the names written down.
I have the names written down.
And you have Naeem for the Harb.
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
Well, hopefully, if we take one out, we will we'll keep narrowing it down until we. Gratitude to the employees who are out there in the storm clearing the land. They're very grateful. All right, we'll tally one more time. Uh-oh. Time, maybe we just open up the floor for some conversation and move ourselves towards a candidate. We are ready, Miss Amy. And thank you to Peggy. You will serve that remaining seat on the Harb. We appreciate your service very much. Thank you to everybody who applied, everybody who put in. We hope you find lots of other ways to continue to serve the city of Newberry. And now we will go back to item C. And Madam Attorney, if you've had a chance to fill in all the names, if you could read that resolution with the actual names of the people who will serve on the board.
I'd be happy to. This is Resolution 2019-16, amending Resolution 2018-19, Resolution 2017-14, and Resolution 2017-17. a resolution of the City of Newberry, Florida, appointing members to the Planning and Zoning Board of the City of Newberry, Florida, establishing calendar year appointment terms, repealing all resolutions in conflict, and providing an effective date. And the names on that resolution would be Mayor Marlowe, Jessica Baker, Walt Boyer, Gavin Johnson, Bill Conrad, and Linda Woodcock.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve that resolution as was just read?
Motion to approve as read.
I have a motion from Commissioner Herson, a second from Commissioner Martin. Any questions from the dais on the motion on the floor? Hearing none. Any questions from the audience on the motion on the floor? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Madam Attorney, will you read Resolution 2019-17 with the names?
I'd be happy to. This is Resolution 2019-17, a resolution of the City of Newberry, Florida, appointing members to the Historic Architectural Review Board of the City of Newberry, Florida, establishing calendar year appointment terms, repealing all resolutions in conflict, and providing an effective date. And the names on that resolution are Mayor Jordan Marlowe, Jessica Baker, Walt Boyer, Gavin Johnson, Bill Conrad, Linda Woodcock, Naeem Urchin, and Peggy Loy.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve that motion as was just read?
So moved, 2019-17 resolution.
I have a motion from Commissioner Martin.
Second.
Second from Commissioner Herson. Any further questions from the dais on the motion on the floor? Any public questions on the motion on the floor? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. And we are on to item E, which is Brian again. Busy night. Amend the code to incorporate fully enclosed small animal boarding facilities.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Staff recommendation is to receive the presentation and provide direction to staff. We're looking for your direction. Just a brief history. Right now, our land development regulations consider all commercial facilities that house small animals, dogs, cats, whatever, as kennels, open air kennels, basically. Commercial kennels are only allowed by right in the commercial intensive zoning district. They are only allowed by special exception in the agricultural zoning districts. In the CI districts, they are allowed, but only under the condition that they're in completely soundproof buildings. And so you wouldn't have problems with sound noise complaints from neighbors. In the agricultural district, if approved by special exception, they still have to meet a 300-foot building setback from the edge of the property line. Interestingly, Alachua County actually allows for fully enclosed and climate-controlled small animal boarding facilities to be located within 50 feet of the property line. So it's considerably less restrictive than ours, but it is with the caveat that it's fully enclosed and climate-controlled, so that's going to cut substantially down on the noise issue. And so, as an example, this would be your open-air type of kennel where the animals are always housed on the outside, as opposed to a modern facility, especially in the south where, because of the heat, you're going to be fully enclosed, air-conditioned. They do typically still have small runs outside where the dogs have to go out and do their business and staff cleans it up later, but they're not left outside. That's the in and out kind of temporary thing. And then some of them even have courtyards in between the buildings where again, most of the sound would be mitigated because it would be within the enclosed courtyard surrounded by buildings. And so what staff is seeking direction on is whether the commission would be interested in sort of matching the county's allowance of a 50-foot setback for a fully enclosed air-conditioned facility, maintain the same 300-foot requirement that we have if it is an open-air kennel facility. And so the first question that staff's presenting to you would be, does the commission approve of changing the LDRs to be a bit more permissive, reduce the setback lines for fully enclosed small animal boarding facilities? And if so, would they prefer to allow those facilities by right, meaning instead of a special exception, which the commission exerts much more control over, would they be comfortable with making, would the commission be comfortable with making that by right in the agricultural zoning district, much as it is by, like in the commercial intensive zoning district? Or would you prefer to maintain that extra level of scrutiny, extra level of control over approval by special exception?
Brian, is the county's ordinance by right? Or is it by special exception?
In the agricultural rural business district, which has a lot of restrictions built into the zoning district, it is by right.
Okay. Commissioner Martin?
I believe.
Once the kennel's in place, does it change its classification out of ag?
No, sir. If the commission chose to do it by right, it would still maintain its agricultural zoning district. It's same with special exception. It would still be zoned agriculture. It'd be an allowable permitted use in ag.
I think Commissioner Barton is asking, are kennels agricultural in nature? Is that the nature? It sounds more
It's
like
a
commercial venture.
commercial endeavor that's allowed in agricultural zoning. This would not apply to, well, actually, I guess the 300-foot still applies to personal kennels, but non-commercial kennels. But this would pertain only to, at least we're conceived it to pertain only to its commercial kennels.
So in both instances, they're fully enclosed. Right.
Yes, sir. They would be. It would basically, allowing it by right in an agricultural district would be mirroring what we allow.
But we're
in
just
commercial
discussing
intensive.
the enclosed.
Yes, sir.
Just a point of question. How many animals how many animals constitutes a kennel? Minimum and maximum? Do we have limits?
Basically, anything over 20 constitutes a kennel. But then again, any facility that takes boards animals for pay would be considered a commercial boarding facility or kennel.
Commissioner Norfleet?
Whenever those kennels are put in, or the enclosed facility in agricultural, do they get the agricultural tax exemption on property taxes?
Mr. Mayor, I don't believe they do. Whether under the county's current code that allows for them, and that wouldn't change with ours either. I believe they'd lose the exemption.
Commissioner Farnsworth?
It just seems like an odd thing to come before us. Is it precipitated by something?
Mr. Mayor, we did have an inquiry by a business that is interested in annexing into the city of Newberry, but they wanted to find out because currently they comply with the county code, but if they annexed into the city of Newberry, they would not comply with Newberry's current code. So they wanted to find out first if the commission would be interested in making an amendment that would facilitate their annexation.
And go ahead, Commissioner Martin.
I'm wondering if we could at least get a head nod whether or not the 50-foot is an issue. And then we can kind of move on to whether or not we want to keep it as a special exception process or green light those as well at this point.
I agree, and what staff is asking is for direction on those two fronts. So however many of you are comfortable, fully enclosed kennel, 50-foot setback instead of the 300.
I'm fine with that.
3 yes.
Noise ordinance would still be in effect.
Noise ordinance would still be in effect. Obnoxious, annoying ordinance would still be in effect. Okay, so we're good with the 50, and none of these are final. What we're doing is giving staff direction to go back, craft one, and bring it forward.
Yeah.
Now, what's the difference, Brian? I mean, I understand the difference between right and special exception, but the business that wants to annex in, they could annex in and then just come for a special exception, correct? Are we not allowed to grant a special exception that would break that 50-foot, 300-foot barrier?
We would need to amend the code specifically. As it reads right now, it's allowable by special exception, but it's very specific and then requires that 300-foot barrier. So we could still do it by special exception and just remove that or move that to a 50-foot buffer instead. But by right, they would not have to come back for review by the Planning and Zoning Board or the Commission for permission to expand the facility or build a new one. Of course, by special exception, it gives the Commission much more leeway on adding additional conditions for their permitting.
Okay, Commission thoughts. Commissioner Farnsworth?
I think that we should do it on a case-by-case basis because we don't know exactly where the facility is going to be located, where it's going to be located 50 foot from a house or some other facility or some other business, and I think it should be done on a case-by-case business, or by case-by-case, but that's my opinion.
Commissioner Martin?
I was kind of thinking a little bit along the same lines, and then, although I would suspect the majority of an ag-zoned property is not going to necessarily be near a house, but I guess that's also not 100% either. Following along his lead, I think we just keep the special exception process in place, unless I can be convinced otherwise, I guess.
Other thoughts about if the Commission asks you to bring it back by right, that's basically their last bite of the apple. Then as long as in any agricultural zone, I could put a kennel 50 feet away from the property line, enclosed kennel 50 feet away from the property line.
Yes, sir.
And move forward.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
It'd be just down to, as we did earlier with Mr. Torrance, a site plan review.
Okay. So we don't, Commissioner Farnsworth?
The kennel that's out between here and Gainesville already, it doesn't seem like that's 100 or 300 feet off the road, is that?
Well, actually, Mr. Mayor, that is the kennel in question that's interested in it. Actually,
Okay.
they're not actually in the city of Newberry. They're just over 50 feet from the property line is where the edge of their structures start.
Okay. So all we're doing right now is giving staff direction. So I've got two people that say we've already decided 50 foot is fine. Two people that say keep it a special exception. If I don't hear from any other commissioner, that's what staff is going to take as their marching orders and bring back to you for a vote.
I guess, yeah, I would look at having the special exception rather than by right, just because even in an agricultural zone, you could have a house on the border of the property line or whatever the appropriate setback is, and I guess I'd be less than excited to have a kennel put next to my house.
Okay.
Unless it was some vetting process.
Any last thoughts? Okay. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
All right, Jamie, come tell us about a milling and resurfacing project bid award. Thank you for waiting here all night and dealing with the storm.
I have to go work when we leave here. Trying to. The item before you is Southwest 4th Avenue, 5th Avenue, and 7th Avenue milling and resurfacing project. The recommended action is the commission to approve and authorize the city manager to execute a contract with John C. Hip Construction Equipment Company to mill and resurface Southwest 5th and 7th for a base bid price of $141,308.28, and to pave Southwest 4th Avenue, which is add alternate 2 in the bid package, for $58,693.78 for a total project cost of $200,002.06. And number 2, authorize the city manager to approve change orders not to exceed 15% of the contract amount. Just to give you a little background on the project, the City Commission authorized the annual milling and resurfacing program back in 2017 as part of our capital improvement project, funded by local option fuel tax and the general fund. A few of the projects that we've done in recent years: Newberry Lane, Southwest 257th, Southwest 258th, and Southwest 1st Avenue. The work scope of this project is to repair the road base, mill and resurface, regrade swales, install some sidewalk access ramps, driveway connections, stormwater piping, and striping. We did put an add alternate in the bid, number one, that would incorporate replacing the water crossings after the road was milled and before it was resurfaced. And add alternate 2 was to pave Southwest 4th Avenue, which is the only graded road left in this segment of town. We advertised the project, received 2 bids, one from John C. Hipp, one from Whitehurst. The bids do average around $100 a linear foot. Additional unit costs were provided for potential change orders if there were to be any, and it's projected a 90-day construction time. Add alternate 1, as I said before, was replacing the water crossings. We're not recommending, staff is not recommending that you award this item. We'll perform this work in-house in conjunction with the prime contractor. Just along the lines of add alternate 2, we do maintain 1.8 miles of unpaved road in the core part of town that actually do belong to the city, that are not subject to the interlocals for the unpaved roads that we maintain. And this will eliminate one of those at Southwest 4th. 6 inches lime rock base, 400 linear foot, 20 foot wide, 1.5 inch asphalt placement, SP 9.5 asphalt.
Commissioner Martin, did you have a question there?
My only comment has to do actually with the nearby three-way stop sign at 5th Avenue, 1 block south of 4th.
Yes, sir.
Whenever it rains, the water sits there.
That's a large reason. That's a large reason this area was selected, because we could kill multiple birds on one project. We're repairing that stormwater issue. We're going to construct swales on both sides of the road, and some cross drains and inlet storm structures, and a small retention facility to the west side of 255th to handle whatever is in the intersection that does not perk in the swales.
Okay.
There's also on at that intersection, there's a large section of asphalt paving constructed in the right-of-way in front of a residential location. As part of this project, we've talked with the property owner. We're removing all of that asphalt in the right-of-way. It actually contributes to the flooding and some of the elevation issues there. But that's a major reason that we selected this project out of all the Class 1 roads in our inventory, is to try to correct that drainage issue and repair some of the roads that are in poor shape. So as I stated before, there's your base bid and your add alternate 2 for a total project cost of $200,002.06. And we are asking that the board also authorize the city manager to execute change orders up to 15% of the contract cost, but that the execution of any change order would be brought back to the commission at the next regular commission meeting.
All right. Board have questions? Commissioner Norfleet?
I've got 2 questions. On Southwest 4th Avenue, I'm sure the residents that live on that would like to have it paved, but will it increase their property taxes?
I believe it will increase their property value, not increase their property taxes.
Mr. Mayor, the per state regulations, property values, taxable property values can only increase by 3% or the increase in appraised value, whichever is lesser. So even if we improve the road and it increases the value of their property substantially, the maximum that their taxes could go up would be 3% per state law.
Is that per year?
That is per year.
And one other question, the documents y'all give us, is there, I guess, I'm assuming there's a typo in these documents here?
On the change order percentage, originally it was set at 10%. We are asking the board authorize up to 15% of the contract cost authorization to the city manager.
And also on add alternate one, it's showing that alternate one is 4th Avenue, but then on your bid sheet, it showed it like you showed
Must
it.
be a typo. Add alternate 2 is 4th Avenue. Add alternate 1 was the replacement of the water crossings.
And they was clear on that?
Yes.
Other questions from the dais?
Okay.
Commissioner Martin?
The add alternate one was the water crossings on 7th, and you're going to tackle those?
Yes, it's not only 7th, but any of the roads that are milled and resurfaced, we would go ahead and replace the galvanized lines that are under the road base while we had it milled off. That would give us the opportunity to put new lines in there. It would be a shame to mill and pave a road and then have a water leak in the center of it shortly thereafter.
Wasn't there a connection issue that we came across with 5th and 7th before?
A connection issue.
Can't remember what it was.
I think there's a parcel to the south of 7th, between that and that little horseshoe subdivision there, and there was some, that we did an analysis of utility availability. I don't recall the outcome. Commissioner Martin may recall better than I.
There was actually utilities that proceeded to the south from 7th.
Right.
Utility easement there, the road right-of-way did not extend through. I did do an estimate several years back as to what it would cost to extend that road through.
Maybe that's what I'm thinking about. Okay. It's not germane to this, so at this point, if we can't remember what it was. All right.
Other questions, comments from the dais? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to open it up to the public.
I make the motion to move forward as recommended.
Okay, I have a motion to move forward as recommended.
Second.
I have a second. I have a motion from Commissioner Martin, a second from Commissioner Farnsworth. Any questions from the dais on the motion on the floor? Any questions from the public on the motion on the floor? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Jamie. And we are on to city comments. City manager.
Mr. Mayor, just quickly mention on that last item, again, that's the commission's interest in making sure that we invest in maintaining our public infrastructure. So this is the third NICE project. It's in the third year of a program that you guys set out to do 3 years ago. Nice to see that those types of projects. The public notices these types of projects more than anything else we could do. That I'll jump into my comments. We are deep into budget. We've met with some elected officials, but not all. If you would like to meet with us and kind of give us some guidelines for where you'd like to see the budget go, please let us know. Our first, but just schedule with Dallas. Our first public workshop is going to be on Wednesday, June 19th at 6 p.m. I think that's on everybody's calendar. I think we've gotten the whole calendar sent out to elected officials as calendar invites. We had without getting into any great detail, we met with a potential economic development project this morning. Certainly no means a slam dunk for Newberry, but the increase in activity is promising. That there's a lot of people out there looking on the commercial manufacturing type side, and hopefully we're going to be a good fit for one of these projects. Also, kind of an economic development interest. I had a meeting this afternoon with Gainesville Regional Utilities to discuss furthering or expanding their natural gas system. You'll recall that a year or so ago, it was actually a year ago, January, we approved a franchise agreement for GRU to extend natural gas here. They had some changeover in staff and kind of dropped the ball on what their planning window looked like. And so there was no activity there. So we kind of re-engaged them, their current staff that hopefully are not ready to retire or fully engaged. And we should see a natural gas extension project coming into Newberry from on the east side of State Road 26 next fiscal year. It's currently in the budget unless it gets lopped out. Mr. Mayor, you're going to speak about annexations? Okay, then I'll skip that one. As you know, High Springs City Commission authorized meeting to discuss law enforcement services with High Springs PD. Our initial meeting is set up for next Monday, and hopefully we'll pull something together fairly quickly so that we'll have options for the board to consider. And speaking of law enforcement, Sheriff Darnell will be here next meeting, which is June the 10th, to provide her annual law enforcement update. Nothing special. It's the same update hopefully with different statistics that she gives every year. And finally, a reminder that the Newberry Fire Station renovation celebration, got a very nice ring to it, is going to be Thursday, June 13th at 3 p.m. I think you all have calendar invites, as well as all of the other elected officials in the Alachua County and their region. That concludes my comments, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. All right, Madam Attorney?
Nothing at this time.
Thank you. Madam Clerk? Thank you, ma'am. Commissioner Herson?
In the interest of the late hour, no, nothing.
Thank you, Commissioner Herson. Commissioner Farnsworth?
Nothing.
Commissioner Martin?
I wanted to remind the commission that at our next meeting, Superintendent Karen Clark will also be here. I've asked her to appear and give us an update with some time-bound actionable goals with regards to the Newberry school systems and where those projects are in the works at this point. So looking forward to her report and hoping that it's as positive as I'd like it to be.
Thank you. Commissioner Norfleet? I just wanted to let everybody know, I want to give a thank you to the Sunrise Rotary Club of Gainesville. If you didn't see the story on TV 20, they came in and organized a lot of local businesses to help beautify the median entranceway to Newberry High School. We had about 60 high school kids show up over a holiday weekend to make that a really quick project. So it was a great moment for the Rotary Club. I really appreciate them. I'm really proud of our kids once again. You know, Newberry High School. Kids never let you down when you need them, and I just wanted to let you guys make sure y'all are aware of it. And then today, I want to let you know that the Alachua County Commission did not vote to object to the annexations, the voluntary annexations that are out on Newberry Road. And they gave every indication that any further annexations in that parcel, at least on the western edge of it, they also would not object to. They reiterated that they would like to work with us to figure out a long-term solution to closing out these enclaves. They threw out 3 or 4 ideas. I said we're always interested in having conversations, so look for those conversations to come. And that will end my comments. Public comment. You waited till 9:54 at night. Now's your chance. Hearing no public comment, we are adjourned.
There you have it. Hopefully the rain will stop.